Good morning. Good afternoon. I don't know what time you watch this, but hopefully it's good whenever you watch this. Shalom. We did a late night Bible reading, which I know has not been posted yet, but I am still going to do them every day and continue to serve the Father's people wherever they are to the best of my ability. Most importantly, the Father. Got some dank banana bread today because check that sticker out. It's coming backwards on the camera there, but we're gonna finish Esther today. Oh, and then we're gonna be in Job. Been waiting for Job. Job is a book. They're all books, but Job is an exciting book. So Esther is 9 to 10, which appear to be longer chapters, and Acts 7, which is also a longer chapter. I'm gonna do a little bit of adjusting. I'm all burly, which is fine. I have some sunblock on. Father, keep the bugs away. We're gonna pray here. There's one bug that you're gonna see me whack at some point in this. I'm gonna move this chair and get on my knees and get in camera view and say, Father, please, as you have trusted me with this word, to do righteousness with this word, that you give me the strength and the fuel to teach your word and to show people how to be in the world and not of the world. And that you bring me home to where I am supposed to be, and bring these people home to where they're supposed to be, and that we build a home together in your kingdom, a grand house for us all to live in, a place to stay. I believe it's called in John 14. Father Yahweh, you are great, you are glorious. You are the omnipotent being that has created all things, and we love you, and we serve you, and we come together in your name, and in Yeshua's name, I pray. Amen. All right, I also got a cup of mate today. I don't believe that there's a coffee. I don't have my homie Hawkham here, but we are gonna have mate later. Yeah, see what happens. Also not gonna make it to Redemption Church this weekend or last weekend, but hopefully, I don't know, at some point. No, we'll get there. Because I know he's got a lot of community ideas too, and we've all got to do our best to serve the Father. It's really why we're here. So, okay. There's a great camera angle when I'm leaned back and a lesser camera angle when I'm leaned forward, so bear with me today. And in the 12th new moon, that is the new moon of Adar, on the 13th day, when the sovereign's command and his decree came to be done on the day that the enemies of the Yehudim had waited to overpower them, it turned around so that the Yehudim overpowered those who hated them. The Yehudim assembled in their cities throughout all the provinces of sovereign Ahasuerus to lay hands on those who sought their evil. And no one stood against them, because fear of them fell upon all people. And all the officials of the provinces and the viceroys and the governors and all those doing the sovereign's work helped the Yehudim, because the fear of Mordecai fell upon them. For Mordecai was great in the palace of the sovereign, and his report spread into all the provinces. For this man Mordecai became greater and greater. And the Yehudim struck all their enemies with the stroke of the sword, with killing and destruction, and did what they pleased to those who hated them. And in the citadel of Shushan, the Yehudim killed and destroyed 500 men, and Parshandatha and Delphon and Aspatha and Paratha, and Adalia, and Aridatha, and Parmashta, and Arisai, and Aridai, and YHWH, the 10 sons of Haman, son of Hammedatha, the enemy of the Yehudim, they killed, but they did not lay a hand on the plunder. On that day, the number of those who were killed in the citadel of Shushan came before the sovereign. And the sovereign said to Sovereigness Esther, the Yehudim have killed and destroyed 500 men in the citadel of Shushan, and the 10 sons of Haman. What have they done in the rest of the sovereign's provinces? And what is your petition? And it is given to you. And what is your further request? And it is done. And Esther said, if it pleases the sovereign, let it be given to the Yehudim who are in Shushan to do again tomorrow according to today's decree, and let Haman's 10 sons be hanged on the wooden structures. And the sovereign commanded this to be done. And the decree was given in Shushan, and they hanged Haman's 10 sons. And the Yehudim who were in Shushan also assembled on the 14th day of the new moon of Adar, and they killed 300 men at Shushan, but they did not lay a hand on the plunder. And the rest of the Yehudim in the sovereign's provinces assembled and stood for their lives, and to get rest from their enemies, and to kill 75,000 of their enemies, but they did not lay a hand on the plunder. That was on the 13th day of the new moon Adar, and on the 14th they rested in it, and made it a day of feasting and gladness. But the Yehudim who were at Shushan assembled on the 13th day, as well as on the 14th day, and on the 15th they rested, and made it a day of feasting and gladness. Therefore the Yehudim of the villages who dwelt in the unwalled towns were making the 14th day of the new moon of Adar a good day of gladness and feasting, and for sending portions to one another. And Mordecai wrote these matters, and sent letters to all the Yehudim who were in all the provinces of sovereign Ahasuerus, both near and far, to establish among them to perform the 14th and 15th days of the new moon of Adar yearly, as the days on which the Yehudim had rest from their enemies, as the new moon, which was turned from sorrow to joy for them, and from mourning to a good day, and that they should make days of feasting and joy, of sending portions to one another and gifts to the poor. And the Yehudim undertook to do as they had begun, and as Mordecai had written to them, because Haman, son of Hammedatha the Agagite, the adversary of all the Yehudim, had plotted against the Yehudim to destroy them, and had cast pur, that is the lot, to crush them and destroy them. But when she came before the sovereign, he commanded by letter that his evil plot which Haman had plotted against the Yehudim should return on his own head, and that he and his sons should be hanged on the wooden structure. Therefore they called these days Purim, after the name Pur. Therefore, because of all the words of this letter, what they had seen concerning this matter, and what had come upon them, the Yehudim established and imposed it upon themselves and upon their seed, and all who should join them, that without fail they should perform these 2 days every year according to their writing at their appointed time, and that these days should be remembered and performed throughout every generation, every clan, every province, and every city, and that these days of Purim should not fail from among the Yehudim, and that the remembrance of them should not cease from their seed. And Sovereigness Esther, the daughter of Abihail, with Mordecai, the Yehudi, wrote with all authority to confirm this second letter about Purim. And Mordecai sent letters to all the Yehudim to the 127 provinces of the reign of Ahasuerus, words of peace and truth, to establish these days of Purim at their appointed times, as Mordecai the Yehudi and Sovereigness Esther had established for them, and as they established for themselves and their seed concerning matters of their fasting and lamenting. And the decree of Esther established these matters of Purim, and it was written in the book. Okay, so Esther 10 is like 3-4 verses, which I'm kind of surprised about. I didn't know that they did that. That's the first time I've seen that in this book. Other than the Psalms, which is like, I think like Psalm 118 is like 2 verses or something, but they're all different like stories, right? Like why not just make, why not just make chapter 9 include those 3 verses? We'll find out. Let's take it from the top. We remember from last night that basically the Yehudim had won. Sovereign Ahasuerus crowned Mordecai as a man whom the sovereign delights to value, and was saved, and Haman had to parade him around, and then Haman got killed, and all his house was given to Mordecai through Esther. And in the 12th new moon, that is the new moon of Hadar, on the 13th day, when the sovereign's command and decree came to be done, on the day that the enemies of the Yehudim had waited to overpower them, it turned around so that the Yehudim overpowered those who hated them. And I brought up last night, had waited to overpower them. They were toying with them. They set this date. The date was set in the first new moon. They set it for the 12th new moon. So a whole year they're basically setting to wait to kill the Jews. And so it says here, waited to overpower them. And so this is 3:15. We got this date. The runners went out, hastened by, maybe it's not 15. (3:13). And the letters were sent by the runners into all the sovereign's provinces to cut off, to kill, and to destroy all the Yehudim, both young and old, little children and women, in one day, on the 13th day of the 12th new moon, which is in the new moon of Adar, and to plunder their possessions. So that's the day that Haman had set to kill the Jews, and so now we see that day come, and it turned around so that the Yehudim overpowered those who hated them. So on that day that the Jews were supposed to die, the enemy was killed. The Yehudim assembled in their cities throughout all the provinces of sovereign Ahasuerus to lay hands on those who sought their evil, and no one stood against them, because fear of them fell upon all the people. We saw that in 8:17 as well. And in every province and in every city where the sovereign's command and decree came, the Yehudim had joy and gladness, a feast and a good day. And many of the people of the land were becoming Yehudim, for fear of Yehudim had fallen upon them. This is really the fear of Yah. This is not just the fear of the Yehudim. You can say like that it's, whatever, the fear of, it's not the fear of the people. As they have no power, it's the fear of Yah. And just like when people reject a man of God, it is the rejection of Yah. The fullness of integration of all the aspects of Elohim. We're going to get into that. That is, they say, well, how can there be evil on the earth, right? Well, God created all things, so there has to be evil in God. So there has to be a part of God that is evil and does not obey. Well, he doesn't obey men, right? Like it's in Joshua where he stops the sun, and if this was the only time ever that he listened to a man, and he answers his prayers, but he does not he does not just say, he does not just do when somebody asks. I'm not sure where this is. Yahushua was just slaughtering people in this book. Joshua is a good book too, an important book. We're not going to do it for a long time, but yeah. So, point being that all of these are integrations of El. They're all parts of El. And so to deny any part of that is God is still a rejection of God. Whether, no matter what you're doing, no matter what you're giving up, no matter what you're giving to him, there's a part of you that you need to that you can't reject. In order to live in the fullness of God, you know, like even Yeshua went in and flipped tables and stuff, you know. And we've talked about the sword and how, you know, he's not a man shaken by the wind, you know. So, I mean, the slaughter, you know, they still take revenge. They didn't say, you know, it's okay, we're just going to love them. So that is the fear of them, is the fear of God, which is a term that I'm sure you've heard. The fear of God, put the fear of God in them. And it's what they do. And all the officials of the provinces and the viceroy and the governors and all those doing the sovereign's work helped the Yehudim because the fear of Mordecai fell upon them. So I don't know who their enemy left is at this point, because the Agagites were the enemies and they might still be in the provinces, but the governors, the viceroys, all the guys who signed the decree originally are now on the side of the Yehudim, not only as they should be because they're servants of the king, but they should be because of the authority of the Yehudim within the kingdom, but also under Elohim. For Mordecai was great in the palace of the sovereign, and his report spread into all the provinces. For this man, Mordecai, became greater and greater. People start hearing about him, and that adds to his, just as we saw, you know, more and more people following Yeshua, 3,000 to 5,000 in a day. Mordecai, and that's just for the apostles. Mordecai, as he gains reputation, he becomes greater and greater. And the Yehudim struck all their enemies with the stroke of the sword, with killing and destruction, and did what they pleased to do to those who hated them. Did what they pleased to do to those who hated them. I mean, imagine if we could do that, you know what I mean? And I'm not talking about, like, you know, Jennifer cheated on you. Well, I mean, there's Torah for that too, but I'm talking about, like, those who, you know, seek harm to the people of Yehudim, you know, the people of Yah, because Jennifer might have had a slip up, but, you know, what is, you know, like, forming a plot for a year to kill a whole people group is a different caliber, a different form of hatred, murder without cause, you know what I mean? We all give in to sin at some point in our iniquity, but giving in to sin is different than hatred in the heart, you know. And struck them with the sword. That's not the first time we see that phrasing, but it's important to remember that there's a lot of sword striking, you know, and the word is our sword, and we have to be men of battle. Yahuwah is a man of battle. We read that in Exodus 15:3. And yes, Solomon is allowed to build the house of Elohim because he's a man of peace, but David also is the one who, it's not the line of Solomon, it is the line of David that the king will be brought through, because he too is a man of battle. And Parshandatha, and in the citadel of Shushan, the Yehudim killed and destroyed 500 men. So in the citadel, 500 men. And Parshandatha and Dalphon and Aspatha and Paratha and Adaliah and Aradiatha and Parmashta and Arisai and Ardai and Yezatha, the 10 sons of Haman, son of Hamadatha, the enemy of the Yehudim, they killed, but they did not lay a hand on the plunder. And we're going to see that lay a hand on the plunder again, but basically they're not taking the spoil of war. They're not taking the goods for them. They are, they're killing the people and not taking their stuff. They don't want their things. It's not like it's you know, war. They're not going to war, you know what I mean, and taking the spoil. They're just like, we want these enemies eradicated from us. And so that's what they're executing on. And these are the 10 sons of Haman who get destroyed. And yeah, they're just not, how do you say? They've really just got no shot. Their dad, they just want to kill the bloodline of the evil that is trying to get them. On that day, the number of those who killed in the citadel of Shushan came before the sovereign. King Ahasuerus hears about this 500 men that are killed, and the sovereign said to Sovereigness Esther, the Yehudim have killed and destroyed 500 men in the citadel of Shushan, and the 10 sons of Haman. What have they done in the rest of the sovereign's provinces, and what is your petition? And it is given to you. And what is your further request, and it is done. So he just looks to her. He says, this is what's going on. What else are they doing? You know, this is what I've heard so far. What else have they done? And what more do you need? I'll give it to you. What is your request? And it is done. And Esther said, if it pleases the sovereign. She always says, if it pleases the sovereign. She always says, if it pleases you, you know, not can I have, but if it's pleasing to you, the sovereign, let it be given to the Yehudim who are in Shushan to do again tomorrow according to today's decree. And let Haman's 10 sons be hanged on the wooden structure. So they're already dead. They killed them. And we have this in verse 10, but also in verse 12. So they're already dead, and now Esther wants them hung and displayed on the wooden structure that Haman was killed on, so that everybody knows what happens when you mess with the Yehudim. 14, and the sovereign commanded this to be done. And the decree was given in Shushan, and they hanged Haman's 10 sons. The sovereign says yes, and so they hang them. And the Yehudim who were in Shushan also assembled on the 14th day of the new moon of Adar, and they killed 300 men at Shushan. But they did not lay a hand on the plunder. We saw that again. They don't want the money. They don't want the spoils. All they want is to be safe. And so this is the 13th day. This starts. This goes into the 14th day. So now they've got 500 the first day, 300 the second day, 800 in 2 days. This is in the citadel of Shushan. And the rest of the Yehudim in the sovereign's provinces assembled and stood for their lives, and to get rest from their enemies, and to kill 75,000 of their enemies, but they did not lay a hand on the plunder. So all the other, so Shushan's 1 provinces, there's 127. So in the other 126 provinces, 75,000 men, enemies of the Yehudim, are killed, and not a single one of those dead lose their riches. The Jews do not take a dollar from any of them. They don't take they don't take houses, they don't take cattle, they don't take gold, they don't take women, they don't take anything. That was on the 13th day of the new moon of Adar. And on the 14th day, they rested in it and made it a feasting and a gladness. Okay, so we know that the Yehudim in Shushan went out for 2 days, 13th and 14th. These Yehudim in the other provinces rest on the 14th day, and all that, they killed 75,000 men in 1 day. They just got together and just started hammering these guys, started taking them out, and nobody was going to stop them, because all the officials of the provinces and the viceroys and the governors and all those doing the sovereign's work helped the Yehudim, because of the fear of Mordecai fell upon them. Okay. But the Yehudim who were at Shushan assembled on the 13th day, as well as the 14th day. And on the 15th, they rested in it and made it a day of feasting and gladness. So either way, they're celebrating. The ones outside of Shushan are celebrating, and the next day, the ones in Shushan are celebrating. Therefore, the Yehudim of the villages who dwelt in the unwalled towns were making the 14th day of the new moon of Adar a good day of gladness and feasting, and for sending portions to one another. They are celebrating. The best way to put that. And Mordecai wrote these matters and sent letters to all the Yehudim who were in all the provinces of the sovereign YHWH, both near and far, to establish among them, to perform the 14th and 15th days of the new moon of Adar yearly, as the days on which the Yehudim had rest from their enemies, as the new moon which was turned from sorrow to joy for them, and from mourning to a good day, that they should make them days of feasting and joy, of sending portions to one another and gifts to the poor. And Mordecai does this, and this is a remembrance, and this is not necessarily ordained by Yah. So that's all I'm going to say on that, but I do want that noted. Mordecai wrote these matters and sent letters to all the Yehudim who were in all the provinces of sovereign Ahasuerus, both near and far, to establish among them, to perform the 14th and 15th days of the new moon of Adar yearly. So they had rest from their enemies, sorrow to joy, from mourning to a good day, days of feasting and joy. And they sent gifts, portions to one another, and gifts to the poor. They rejoice. And gifts to the poor. They don't give anything to Yah. They give gifts to the poor. So they recognize that this is almost more reminding me of Mitzrayim, where it's like they realize that they were almost killed, and so they appreciate life a little bit more. And the Yehudim undertook to do as they had begun, and as Mordecai had written to them. Because Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the adversary of all the Yehudim, had plotted against the Yehudim to destroy them, and had cast pur, that is the lot, to crush them and destroy them. They're like, yeah, that's cool, because we almost got destroyed. But when she came before the sovereign, he commanded by letter that his evil plot, which Haman But when she came before the sovereign, he commanded by letter that his evil plot, which Haman had plotted against the Yehudim, should return on his own head, and that he and his sons should be hanged on the wooden structure. I'm just wondering who she is, but it's got to be Esther. And it also doesn't appear that Esther is writing this book necessarily as much as it is about Esther. Maybe we find out who in chapter 10 wrote this book, but right now we don't have an actual author, unless it's just written in third person like that, and we don't see an I. This is the first time I'm recognizing like a she, as in like relativeness, you know what I mean? Like it's not like just putting up Esther, like it's more humanizing Esther as opposed to objectifying her in the sense of Esther, character, you know. Therefore they called these days Purim, after the name Pur. Therefore, because of all the words of this letter, what they had seen concerning this matter, and what had come upon them, the Yehudim established and imposed it upon themselves and upon their seed and all who should join them, that without fail they should perform these 2 days every year according to their writing and at their appointed time, and that these days should be remembered and performed throughout every generation, every clan, every province, and every city, and that these days of Purim should not fail from among the Yehudim, and that the remembrance of them should not cease from their seed. And, you know, they don't actually super glorify Yahweh in this, which is interesting. I'd said about that the other day. Is the name of Yahweh even in this book? That's so odd. I was actually talking about that. The name of Yahweh is nowhere in this book, and that's the first book that I found that is a thing. And so it's just because they're Yehudi that this worked. I mean, obviously Yah has his intervention. We talked about that with the timing of the remembrance of Mordecai, and you know, Mordecai saving the sovereign and all these things. The Spirit's moving. But as far as like their dedication unto him, they don't dedicate this to him. As I'm saying Purim, I think I remember hearing about Jews doing this. 12th new moon, 14th day. Pesach is on the 14th day of the first new moon. So totally different kind of festival, but a remembrance nevertheless. And Sovereigness Esther, the daughter of Abihail, with Mordecai the Yehudi, wrote with all authority to confirm the second letter about Purim, And so now they make it an official decree. It's not just an order from Mordecai, who is now pretty much king of the Jews at this point, because he's a right-hand man, a man who the sovereign delights to value. And Mordecai sent letters to all the Yehudim, to the 127 provinces of the reign of Ahasuerus, words of peace and truth, to establish these days of Purim at their appointed times, as Mordecai the Yehudi and sovereigness Esther had established for them, and as they had established for themselves and their seed concerning matters of their fasting and lamenting. So they do. They do a fast, and Esther declares the fast. In 4:16, go and gather all the Yehudim who are present in Shushan and fast for me, and do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I too and my young women shall fast in the same way. Then I shall go to the sovereign, which is against the law, and if I shall perish, I shall perish. So even in this fasting, it doesn't say we shall declare a fast unto Yahweh. It doesn't say anything about praying, but it does say lamenting here. And lamentation, to my understanding, prayer is like telling Yah what you need. It's asking for something, but lamenting is basically being sorrowful about all the things that you've done wrong, repenting, and having a disposition of need for correction, and sadness, and crying out, more than it is just like daily talking to the Father and a prayer and a basic necessity conversation. So, and the decree of Esther established these matters of Purim, and it was written in the book. So shall it be. Chapter 10. And sovereign Ahasuerus laid compulsory labor on the land and the islands of the sea, and all the acts of his power and his might, and the exact account of the greatness of Mordecai, with which the sovereign made him great, are they not written in the book of the annals of the sovereigns of Media and Persia? For Mordecai the Yehudi was second to sovereign Ahasuerus, and great among the Yehudim, and pleasing to his many brothers, seeking the good of his people, and speaking peace to all his seed. So, sovereign Ahasuerus starts getting slaves, and the acts of his power and might are written, and the exact account of the greatness of Mordecai, with which the sovereign made him great, are they not written in the book of the annals of the sovereign of the Media and Persia? And so, not only do we have, the kings of Israel and Yehuda doing these, like keeping records, we get that in every culture pretty much, and I don't know how many of these actually survive, because throughout war times and stuff, a lot of times when a new people takes over the land, they'll destroy all the records of the old people, and that's really what makes it amazing as far as the biblical anthology, is the record keeping of this. It's like they hid away like scrolls of the Torah, and like they just had such good verbal memory, and like 12 people knew it, so it was like it could get, if one person forgot one thing, well, we'll plug in here with these 7 people who know it, and then 4 people had no idea, so that level of record keeping. For Mordecai the Yehudi was second to sovereign Ahasuerus, and great among the Yehudim, and pleasing to his many brothers, seeking the good of his people, and speaking peace to all his seed. That's it. That's the book of Esther. They live happily ever after. Pleasing to his brothers, seeking the good of his people, and speaking peace to all his seed. How beautiful. Yeah. And this does, now that I'm seeing this and reading these books, I appreciate the awkward order of these books, because that has to come, because this is all taking place in Medo Persia, but Ezra, the next book, Well, this also starts in Persia. As I was going to say, it talks about Nebuchadnezzar, but I guess he was already done with Nebuchadnezzar was already done ruling at the time of the Medo-Persians, and it says that it's just the people who were coming out of the exile. So Nebuchadnezzar is noted for taking them into exile, and then Koresh brings them out of exile to build the temple for them. And like even Ruth is in just randomly in the middle of the book, you know, when it's clearly like Ruth needs to be before kings. I remember the first time I read Ruth, and I was like, how do you even come up with this whole like plot of like what is, you know what I mean, like what is the how do you have a King David in the storyline before you have a Ruth? I just don't know. Again, Quentin Tarantino movie. All right, that's the book of Esther. We finished another book, and now we're in Acts 7. And the high priest said, "Is this so?" And he replied, "Men, brothers, and fathers, listen. The Elohim of esteem appeared to our father Abraham when he was in Aram Naharim, before he dwelt in Haran, and said to him, 'Come out of your land and from your relatives, and come here into a land that I shall show you.' Then he came out of the land of the Kasdim and dwelt in Haran, and from there, after the death of his father, he removed him to this land in which you now dwell. And he gave him no inheritance in it, not a foot of it, but he promised to give to him for a possession and to his seed after him, when as yet he had no child. And Elohim spoke in this way, that his seed would be sojourning in a foreign land, and that they would be enslaved and mistreated 400 years. And the nation to whom they shall be enslaved I judge, said Elohim. And after they shall come out and serve me in this place, and he gave him the covenant of circumcision. And so he brought forth Yishak and circumcised him on the 8th day. And Yishak brought forth Jacob, and Jacob brought forth the 12 ancestors. And the ancestors, becoming jealous, sold Joseph into Mitzrayim, but Elohim was with him, and delivered him out of all his afflictions, and gave him favor and wisdom before Pharaoh, sovereign of Mitzrayim. And he appointed him governor over Mitzrayim and all his house. Then a scarcity of food and great distress came over all the land of Mitzrayim and Canaan, and our fathers found no food. But Jacob heard that there was grain in Mitzrayim, and he sent out our fathers the first time. And at the second time Joseph was made known to his brothers, and Joseph's race became known to the Pharaoh. And Joseph sent and called his father Jacob and all his relatives to him, 75 people. And Jacob went down to Mitzrayim and died, he and our fathers. And they were brought over to Shechem, and laid in the tomb that Abraham bought for a price of silver from the sons of Hamor, the father of Shechem. But as the time of the promise drew near, which Elohim had sworn to Abraham, the people increased and multiplied in Mitzrayim until another sovereign arose who did not know Joseph. Having dealt treacherously with our race, this one mistreated our fathers, making them expose their babies so that they should not live. At that time Moshe was born, and he was pleasing to Elohim, and he was reared 3 months in the house of his father. But he was exposed. The daughter of Pharaoh took him up and reared him as her own son. And Moshe was instructed in all the wisdom of the Mitzrites, and was mighty in words and works. And when he was 40 years old, it came into his heart to visit his brothers, the children of Israel. And seeing one of them being wronged, he defended and revenged him who was oppressed, smiting the Mitzrite. And he thought that his brothers would have understood that Elohim would give deliverance to them by his hand, but they did not understand. And the next day he appeared to 2 of them as they were fighting, and urged them to peace, saying, Men, you are brothers. Why do you wrong one another? But he who was wronging his neighbor pushed him away, saying, Who made a ruler and a judge over us? Do you wish to kill me as you killed the Mitzrite yesterday? And at this saying, Moshe fled and became a sojourner in the land of Midian, where he fathered 2 sons. And after 40 years were completed, a messenger of Yahuwah appeared to him in a flame of fire in a bush in the wilderness of Mount Sinai. And Moshe, seeing it, marveled at the sight, and coming near to look, the voice of Yahuwah came to him, saying, I am the Elohim of your fathers, the Elohim of Abraham, and the Elohim of Yitzchak, and the Elohim of Jacob. And Moshe trembled and did not have the courage to look. But Yahuwah said to him, take your sandals off your feet, for the place where you stand is set apart ground. I have certainly seen the evil treatment of my people who are in Mitzrayim, and I have heard their groaning, and have come down to deliver them. And now come, let me send you to Mitzrayim. This Moshe, whom they had refused, saying, who made you ruler and a judge? This one Elohim sent to be a ruler and a deliverer by the hand of the messenger who appeared to him in the bush. This one led them out after he had done wonders and signs in the land of Mitzrayim and in the Red Sea, and in the wilderness 40 years. This is the Moshe who said to the children of Israel, Yahuwah your Elohim shall raise up for you a prophet like me from your brothers, him you shall hear. This is who was in the assembly in the wilderness with the messenger who spoke to him on Mount Sinai, and with our fathers who received the living words to give to us, unto whom our fathers would not become obedient, but thrust away, and in their hearts they turned back to Mitzrayim, saying to Aaron, make us mighty ones to go before us, for this Moshe who led us out of the land of Mitzrayim, we do not know what has become of him. And they made a calf in those days, and brought an offering to the idol, and were rejoicing in the works of their own hands. So Elohim turned and gave them up to worship the host of the heavens, as it has been written in the book of the prophets. Did you bring slaughtered beasts and offerings unto me during 40 years in the wilderness, O house of Israel? And you took up the shelter of Molech, and the star of your mighty one, Kiyun, images which you made to bow before them. Therefore I shall remove you beyond Babel. The tent of witness was with our fathers in the wilderness as he appointed, instructing Moshe to make it according to the pattern which he had seen, which our fathers, having received it in turn, also brought with Yehoshua into the land possessed by the nations, whom Elohim drove out before the face of our fathers until the days of Dawid, who found favor before Elohim and asked to find a dwelling for the Elohim of Jacob. But Shalomo built him a house. However, the Most High does not dwell in dwellings made with hands, as the prophet says, the heaven is my throne, and earth is my footstool. What house shall you build for me, says Yahuwah, or what is the place of my rest? Has my hand not made all these? You stiff-necked and uncircumcised in heart and ear. You always resist the set-apart spirit as your fathers did. You also do. Which of the prophets did your fathers not persecute? And they killed those who before announced the coming of the righteous one, of whom you now have become the betrayers and murderers, who received the Torah as it was, ordained by messengers, but did not watch over it. And hearing this, they were cut to the hearts and gnashed the teeth at him. But he, being filled with the set-apart spirit, looked steadily into the heaven, and saw the esteem of Elohim, and Yeshua standing at the right hand of Elohim. And he said, look, I see the heavens open, and the Son of Man standing at the right hand of Elohim. And crying out with a loud voice, they stopped their ears and rushed upon him with one mind, and threw him out of the city and stoned him. And the witnesses laid down their garments at the feet of the young man named Shaul. And they were stoning Stephanos as he was calling and saying, Master, Yeshua received my spirit. And kneeling down, he cried out with a loud voice, Master, do not hold this sin against them. And having said this, he fell asleep. That is why I love Stephanos. If you watched yesterday, Psalms 110 was that, sitting at the right hand of Elohim. I knew that it was somewhere. I did not know where yesterday, and I don't remember the context for it, but we're going to move past that. And we're also going to take a slice of banana bread before we get into this explanation because, sustenance and such. And y'all definitely got to eat, and you should eat healthy, and you should eat clean, and you should eat well. And a lot of people are like, well, you can't have carbs. The carbs aren't bad for you. I'm like, carbs are not bad for you. How many times have they eaten grain in here? Manna is bread. You know what I mean? Like, don't tell me that carbs are bad for you. Overconsumption of anything is bad for you. And when you're having like an only carb diet, like if you're only eating bread because that's all you can afford, eat the bread. It'll sustain you. Spelt bread, Ezekiel 4:6, I believe it is. Totally not this sermon, but we're going there because it's important. Ezekiel 4:9, and take wheat and barley and beans and lentil and millet and spelt, and you shall put them into one vessel and make bread of them. You shall eat it as many days as you lie on your side, 390 days. And your food which you eat is by weight, 20 shekels a day, to be eaten from time to time. And drink water by measure, 1/6 of a hin, to be drunk from time to time. So 390 days he sustains life on just this. Not super willing to do that, but the point being that you don't need fancy foods to sustain life. You need clean, pure foods. Carbohydrates. Sugars are carbohydrates, and they're simple carbohydrates. So the body breaks them down fast and then stores them as fat because they're not going to be immediately used. Like, that's why you drink Gatorade when you're doing a sport, because that sugar can be digested quickly through your exercise. Better is electrolyte salts, lmnt.com. Those are the best electrolyte salts. Lima, Montana, November, and what's T? It's not Thomas. Tango. Lima, Montana, November, Tango.com. Homemade food. Although this is sold at a store, it is made at the store. There's no crap in it. There's no, I mean, like, even, like Walmart's baked goods, it's like they're so processed. I don't even know how they get these chemicals into they must not be baked in the back at Walmart, which would make sense, they're like they're probably frozen, and then they're made in a factory, frozen, and then maybe cooked at Walmart. I really don't know. Or they're just brought in separately every day. But this is a good banana bread. Do you guys get a snack? Snack and a nap. We're gonna do that any day. Shabbat. Maybe I'll take a picture of the garden. I should take a picture of the sprouts too. Put that up for yesterday's video. There's a fly that I rebuked. There was a horsefly. I think I got bit by a horsefly. This thing was a full, like that big, at the lake. We went to the lake today. That was a spider. Okay. The rest of that down. Shabbat. There's a lot of meat in here. And we left off with the introduction of Stephanos, and his big claim to fame was some of the so-called congregation of freedmen rose up disputing with Stephanos, but they were unable to resist the wisdom and the spirit by which he spoke. Right? So in itself, they just can't resist the Holy Spirit. And most people can't, because it is within them. They know the truth. So you can feel it do something in you, and some people will just cut it off. Now we're in chapter 7, and the high priest said, "Is this so?" So he's at the council. Let's just go back to 6:13. And they set up false witnesses who said, "This man does not cease to speak blasphemous words against this set-apart place in the Torah. For we have heard him saying that this Yeshua of Nazareth shall overthrow this place and change the institutes which Moshe delivered unto us." And all who sat in the council, looking steadily at him, saw his face was like the face of a heavenly messenger. And the high priest said, "Is this so?" And he replied, "Men, brothers, and fathers, listen. The Elohim of esteem appeared to our father Abraham when he was in Aram Naharim, before he dwelt in Haran, and said to him, 'Come out of your land and from your relatives, and come here into a land that I shall show you.'" So this is his introduction. He starts way at the beginning. This council, this is the high priest. So these are guys that presumably know the Torah, and he doesn't just go, you guys have read the scriptures. He says, "Men, brothers, and fathers, listen. Everybody, and your relationships to me. Pay attention to what I'm about to say here, because this is life-changing stuff." He commands the entirety of the floor because he knows what he has to say is so important. And this whole chapter is one speech, one dialogue out of him. He doesn't pause, nobody interrupts him, there's no questioning back and forth like we see Paul on trial later in chapter 24-ish through chapters, through the mid-20s. And he's got he's got that kind of back and forth. This is a whole testimony, and it's also believed that this is why Acts was written in the first place by Luke, was to basically be a testimony and a witness and justify all the things that the apostles had done. And this is the account of what happened, and how they were treated. And so he begins to say, "The Elohim of esteem appeared to our father Abraham when he was in Aram Naharim." The Elohim of esteem, the Elohim of glory, the greatest Elohim. Man, that phrase, that's not something that we see often. The Elohim of esteem. We don't see him often characterized like that, but that being what he is and how he's talked about, you can just say it and see the light. You see the light when you say it, the glory of Elohim. That's how he's talked about, all the burning white light, which we get in the burning bush as well. We see it a lot in Ezekiel and in Revelation, that glowing white. You can't even look at. Appeared to our father Abraham when he was in Aram Naharim, before he dwelt in Haran, and said to him, "Come out of your land and from your relatives, and you come in here into a land that I shall show you." And we're going to go back to that 12:1. We're going to do a lot of flipping because we're going to pretty much take all of these verses that he says. I want to just go back to them. The way that he says this, he gives pretty much a whole summary to these people. He doesn't even give witness of Yeshua as much and what he's done. He gives the backstory of the Torah and how up until "I shall raise up a prophet like Yahuwah your Elohim shall raise up for you a prophet like me from your brothers," through Deuteronomy. So he's giving a basic account of the Torah. And Yahuwah said to Abraham, "Go yourself out of your land, from your relatives, and from your father's house, to a land which I show you. And I shall make you a great nation, and bless you, and make your name great. And you shall be a blessing. And I shall bless those who bless you, and curse him who curses you. And in your clans, and in you all the clans of the earth shall be blessed." So Abram left, as Yahuwah had commanded him, and Lot went with him. And Abram was 75 years old when he set out from Haran. Boy, if it were that easy for all of us. He was 75 years old when he set out for Haran. From Haran. So he's already... This is like... In 11, we get the introduction to Abraham. Terah. I always forget the name of Abraham's father. There's a book, I want to say Jubilees, where Terah has all these idols, and Abraham destroys them. Abram we got 1126. Terah lived 70 years and brought forth Abram, Nahor, and Haran. And this is the genealogy of Terah. Terah brought forth Abram, Nahor, and Haran brought forth Lot, and Haran died before his father Terah in the land of his birth in Ur-Kasdim. And Abram and Nahor took wives. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife was Milcah, the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah, and the father of Yiscah. And Sarai was barren, she had no child. And Terah took his son Abram, and his grandson Lot, son of Haran, and his daughter-in-law Sarai, his son Abram's wife, and they went out with them from Ur-Kasdim to go to the land of Canaan, and they came to Haran and dwelt there. And the days of Terah came to be 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. So we don't have Aram Naharim, but that might just be a different, like where was Ur-Kasdim, and before he dwelt in Haran. And so, but the father actually calls him out in Haran. Then he came, so he's in Haran, gets called out. Then he came out of the land of the Kasdim and dwelt in Haran. And from there, after the death of his father, he removed him to this land in which you now dwell. And so this is another part where the Bible gets super complicated, because it's like, okay, we can flip back and we can read, like so Abram left as Yahweh commanded him, and Lot went with him, and Abram was 75 years old when he set out from Haran. So he sets out from Haran, but this is him dwelling in Haran. So it seems like Stephanos has just a couple of, it's like when you're talking to somebody and you're like, oh, well, what'd you guys do today? Well, we went to Price Chopper, and then we went to Walmart, and then we went to Target, but really you went to Walmart and then to Target and then to Price Chopper. It's like, not super crucial to salvation. Verse 5, and he gave him no inheritance in it, not a foot of it. But he promised to give it to him for a possession and to his seed after him, when as he had no child. When as yet he had no child. So, because Isaac's going to be the chosen child of Abraham, who is not yet, he's still Abram. The rest of 12 goes on to be about Pharaoh and Mitzrayim and you should, and she's my sister. We're going to read 12:5. And Abram took Sarai his wife, and Lot his brother, and all their possessions that they had gathered, and the beings whom they had acquired in Haran, and they set out for the land of Canaan, and they came to the land of Canaan. And they came out of the land of Canaan and of the Kasdim, and dwelt in Haran, and from there, after the death of his father, he removed him to this land in which you now dwell, which is, I guess, the land of Canaan. And Abram passed through the land to the place of Shechem, as far as the terebinth tree of Moreh. At that time, the Canaanites were in the land. And so, yeah, I suppose that Terah could still have been alive. Because, if he's 70 years, so Terah would have been 145 years old when Abram sets out of Haran. And so we just get that he died at 205 years old, but it's not necessarily chronologically accurate to say that before Abram leaves, So this is another way that the Bible gets weird, and why you need to read verse by verse every word of the word. Okay. And he gave him no inheritance in it, not a foot of it. Deuteronomy 2:5. A lot of flipping, a lot of references, a lot of cross-references. Do not strive with them, for I do not give you any of their land, no, not so much as one footstep, because I have given Mount Seir to Esau as a possession. We'll start at the top of chapter 2. Then we returned and set out into the sea of wilderness. This is Moses basically giving like the final pep talk to Israel. And he's pretty much going through here and recapping everything that happened, because the first generation had died off. So he's telling all this next generation, after the 40 years of wandering, what happened in that time. So we turned and set out into the wilderness, the way of the sea of reeds, as Yahweh spoke to me, and we went around Mount Seir many days. And Yahweh spoke to me, saying, you have gone around this mountain long enough, turn northward. and command the people, saying, you are about to pass over into the border. I just want to point out that it is an 11-day journey. If you read Deuteronomy 1 to 3, it's 11 days journey from Horeb by way of Mount Seir to Kadesh Barnea, and it came to be in the 40th year. So it's a 40-year journey because they make it a 40-year journey, but they could have done it in 11 days. Verse 4, and command the people, saying, you are about to pass over into the border of your brothers, the descendants of Esau, who live in Seir, and they are afraid of you, so be on your guard. Do not strive with them, for I do not give you any of their land, no, not so much as one footstep, because I have given Mount Seir to Esau as a possession. What food you buy from them with silver you shall eat, and also what water you buy from them with silver you shall drink. For Yahweh your Elohim has blessed you in all the work of your hand. He has known your wandering through this great wilderness. These 40 years Yahweh your Elohim has been with you, and you have not lacked any matter. So he uses this as an idiom here, not a foot of it. That's all. That's Deuteronomy 2:5 as a reference here given by my Bible. Stephanos doesn't reference any of these. This is just how, interestingly, the scriptures, the ISR has indicated these as reference points. And so not a foot of it. So he kind of like makes a like joke, like if you know type joke, like not a foot of it. And it's not used in that same, it's not used about Abraham, but it is Torah phrasing. But he promised to give it to him for a possession and to his seed after him, as when he had yet no child. When he had yet no child. This is 12:7, which we read. And Yahweh appeared to Abram and said, to your seed I give this land. And he built there a slaughter place to Yahweh, who had appeared to him. That's the promise. That's the first time that promise is said. To your seed I give this land. And he's in Canaan, place of Shechem, and builds a slaughter place and starts slaughtering. It's also in Genesis 17:8, which we'll look at. We're going to start at the top of 17. And it came to be when Abram was 99 years old that Yahweh appeared to Abram and said to him, I am El Shaddai. Walk before me and be perfect. And I give my covenant between me and you, and shall greatly increase you. And Abram fell on his face, and Elohim spoke with him, saying, as for me, look, my covenant is with you, and you shall become a father of many nations. And no longer is your name called Abram, but your name shall be Abraham, because I shall make you a father of many nations. And I shall make you exceedingly fruitful, and make nations of you, and sovereigns shall come from you. And I shall establish my covenant between you and your seed after you in their generations, for an everlasting covenant, to be Elohim to you and your seed after you. And I shall give to you and your seed after you the land of your sojournings, all the land of Canaan, as an everlasting possession, and I shall be their Elohim. That is the covenant. That I will be their Elohim, and I will give them all the land. And this is right before he has a child. And verse 8, and I shall give to you and your seed after you the land of your sojournings, all the land of Canaan, as an everlasting possession, and I shall be their Elohim. And Elohim said to Abraham, as for you, guard my covenant, you and your seed after you throughout their generations. This is my covenant which you guard between me and you and your seed after you. Every male among you is to be circumcised, and you shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskin, and it shall become a sign of the covenant between me and you. And a son of 8 days is circumcised by you, every male in your generations, he who is born in your house, or bought with silver from any foreigner who is not of your seed. He who is born in your house and he who is bought with your silver has to be circumcised. So shall my covenant be in your flesh for an everlasting covenant. It's the covenant of the flesh. We saw this, I want to say, in Luke. Luke 2:21, and when 8 days were completed for him to be circumcised, his name was called Yeshua, the name given by the messenger before he was conceived in the womb. So Gabriel comes to Mary and says, you're going to name your son Yeshua. And they circumcise him after 8 days. And that's the covenant. And Elohim spoke in this way, that his seed would be sojourning in a foreign land, and that they would be enslaved and mistreated 400 years. This is Genesis 15:13, which is obviously between 12:7 and 17:8. We'll start at 12. And it came to be, when the sun was going down and a deep sleep fell upon Abram, that see, a frightening great darkness fell upon him. And he said to Abram, know for certain that your seed are to be sojourners in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. But the nation whom they serve I am going to judge, and afterward let them come out with great possessions. And so what's going on here is that he's basically, like in chapter 12, God says to Abram, go out, and I rebuke you in the name of Yeshua HaMashiach. Go out, and you shall I shall make a nation of you. And I shall make you a great nation and bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. And I shall bless those who bless you and curse him who curses you. And in you all the clans of the earth shall be blessed. So Abram left. So he goes out immediately. 3 chapters later, he says to Abram, your seed is going to be slaves. And so he's letting him know that this isn't going to be easy, and it goes on to be less easy. But basically Stephanos is setting the scene and the context here. And this whole thing is going to come together at the end. You're going to understand better why we're doing this like this. But we're going to keep going, pressing on. And I also have to say that there's some conjecture about how many years it actually was. Some people say it wasn't actually 400 years. It was a different amount of years, less than 400. How's it going? So I don't know what the answer is, but he tells Abram 400 years. It also had been said 390. I don't know what the truth is, and it's really not pertinent to salvation anyway. How's my boy Lev? Saying hi. All right, verse 7. And the nation to whom they shall be enslaved I shall judge. That was also in Genesis 13, which we read, 15:13. Said Elohim, and after that they shall come out and serve me in this place. 15:14, which I don't believe that we got to, but the nation whom they serve I am going to judge, and afterward let them come out with great possession. So that was actually 14. Verse by verse, chapter by chapter. And then Exodus 3:12. We've been in 3 quite a few times talking about the name. We're gonna go to 9. We're gonna start at Exodus 3:9. And now, see, the cry of the children of Israel has come to me, and I have also seen the oppression with which the Mitzrites oppress them. And now, come, I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Mitzrayim. And Moshe said to Elohim, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh, and that I should bring the children of Israel out of Mitzrayim? And he said, because I am with you. And this is to you the sign that I have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Mitzrayim, you are to serve Elohim on this mountain. This is the sign that I've sent you. And this is to you the sign that I have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Mitzrayim, you are to serve Elohim on this mountain. This is to you is the sign. How are you? You guys going for a walk?
Yeah.
Cool. this is the sign that I've sent you. You shall serve Elohim on this mountain. So you'll get your sign of my glory once you've done this to me. This is the sign that I've sent you. We're going to reread this. Because I am with you. And this is to you the sign that I have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Mitzrayim, you are to serve Elohim on this mountain. Okay. This is to you the sign that I have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Mitzrayim, you are to serve Elohim on this mountain. So, Moses, just so you don't think that you're crazy and you're doing this for your glory, once you bring the people out of slavery, you're going to serve me here. You're not doing this for you. You're doing this for me. And this is the sign. That you serve me on this mountain once the people are out of Mitzrayim. And he gave him the covenant of circumcision. I want to go back to Genesis 15:14. But the nation whom they serve I am going to judge, and afterward let them come out with great possessions. So this is just two verses combined. And after that, they shall come out and serve me in this place. So because the way this is written in my Bible, I'm using the scriptures obviously, and all the Old Testament scriptures are bold. And so I would have kind of skimmed through, not having these, I'd have skimmed through knowing that this was the story of the beginning of the Torah, Genesis and Exodus, and I would have skimmed through and gone along. But I wouldn't have gone word for word necessarily like this. And so this is good that they've done this to me. Okay. And he gave him the covenant of circumcision. And so he brought forth Yitzchak and circumcised him on the 8th day. And Yitzchak brought forth Jacob, and Jacob brought forth the 12 ancestors. We know that the genealogy. We also did talk about the circumcision in is it 17? Yeah. 17, he gets the covenant of the circumcision, and I think we left off at Genesis 17:14. And an uncircumcised male who is not circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin, his life shall be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant. And Elohim said to Abraham, as for Sarai your wife, do not call her name Sarai, for Sarah is her name. And I shall bless her, and also give you a son by her. And I shall bless her, and she shall become nations. Sovereigns of many people are to be from her. And Abraham fell on his face and laughed, and said in his heart, is a child born to a man who is 100 years old, or is Sarai who is 90 years old to bear a child? And Abraham said to Elohim, oh, let Ishmael live before you. And Elohim said, no, Sarah your wife is truly bearing a son to you, and you shall call his name Yitzchak. And I shall establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant, and with his seed after him. And as for Ishmael, I have heard you. See, I shall bless him, and shall make him fruitful, and greatly increase him. He is to bring forth 12 princes, and I shall make him a great nation. But my covenant I establish with Yitzchak, whom Sarah is to bear to you at this appointed time next year. And when he had ended speaking with him, Elohim went up from Abraham. And Abraham took Ishmael his son, and all those born in his house, and all those bought with his silver, every male among the men of Abraham's house, and circumcised the flesh of their foreskin that same day, as Elohim told him. And Abraham was 99 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin, and Ishmael his son was 13 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. And Abraham and his son Ishmael were circumcised that same day, and all the men of his house born in the house or bought with silver from a foreigner were circumcised with him. So that is the covenant of the circumcision and how the rest of it plays out. Obviously Isaac gets circumcised, and so does Jacob, all the way down to we read in Luke 2, covenant of circumcision being fulfilled in Yeshua, because covenants do not go away, they stack. So if you got a son on the way, snip snip. Verse 9, and the ancestors, becoming jealous, sold Joseph into Mitzrayim, but Elohim was with him. This is Genesis 37, 11, 28, 39, 2, 21. This is, I want to tell you, less pertinent to salvation than before. But this is how they end up in Egypt. What is it, 37, 11 and 28. And his brothers envied him, but his father guarded the word. And men, Midianite travelers, passed by, so they pulled Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver, and they took Joseph to Mitzrayim. So his brothers are jealous. Joseph has a dream that basically he's going to rule over all his brothers, which comes true. Hopefully you've read Genesis if you're doing all of this in-depth Bible study. But if not, we're going to read it together, so don't worry, we will go over it. This is like a quick summary of all the happenings of Israel. This is, how do you say, crucial to the timeline, but again, not crucial to salvation. And so Judah basically pushes Joseph in a pit and tears his garment, brings it back to Jacob and says, look, your son Joseph is dead. And then Midianites come and take him out of the pit, and they are like, oh, look, a boy, let's sell him. Because that's obviously the first thing that you do. When you see a little boy, when Johnny's in a well, you pull him out and you say, 20 pieces of silver, anybody? No, totally not. Totally a joke. Don't do that. And 39, 2 and 21. 39:2, and it came to be that Yahuwah was with Joseph, and he became a prosperous man and was in the house of his master, the Mitzrayim. But Yahuwah was with Joseph and extended love and commitment to him, and he gave him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. So Joseph rises up from verse 2, and although he'd been taken down and because chapter 38 is about Yehuda doing some weird whoring. And so in 37, he pushes his brother into a pit. Judah, the original Jew, pushes his brother into a pit in 37, does some weird whoring stuff in 38, and then in 39, Joseph rises up as a king, and little brother Joseph, not as a king, but basically a servant to Pharaoh, and then gets put into prison for Pharaoh thinks that he's trying to sleep with his wife, as we talked about in Esther 6 yesterday, or Ezra 8, when Haman is caught on the couch with Esther, and the sovereign comes back in and he's like, oh, and now you're trying to, what was the word that he used? Ravish. Now you're trying to ravish my sovereigness. before me, with me in the house. And so Joseph is basically accused of doing the same thing, which is not what happens. Joseph is being seduced and he's resisting and gets caught and thrown in prison. And then in the prison, Yahuwah was with Joseph and extended loving commitment to him, and he gave him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. And prison warden gave into the hand of Joseph all the prisoners who were in the prison, and whatever was done there was his doing. The prison warden did not look into any point that was under Joseph's hand, because Yahuwah was with him, and whatever he did, Yahuwah made it prosper. So Joseph is found trustworthy, and Yahuwah makes all that he does prosper. So basically the prison warden's like, yeah, make my life easy. You're a great dude to run this stuff, and I will get paid for it. And so that's what happens. And he's blessed because Yahuwah blesses him. And delivered him out of all his affliction, and gave him favor and wisdom before Pharaoh, sovereign of Mitzrayim, and he appointed him governor over Mitzrayim and all his house. So let's go back to Genesis, because now we're getting into the how does, let's go 41:37 to 46. And the word was good in the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of all his servants. And Pharaoh said to his servants, could we find another like him, a man in whom is the spirit of Elohim? So what's happened in 41, then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since Elohim has shown you all this, there is no one as discerning and wise as you. And so what's happened is that Pharaoh has a dream in the beginning of 41, and it came to be at the end of 2 years' time that Pharaoh had a dream, and saw him standing by the river, and saw 7 cows coming up out of the river, beautiful looking and fat, and they fed amongst the reeds. The reeds. Then saw 7 other cows coming up after them out of the river, ugly and lean of flesh, and stood by the other cows on the bank of the river. So 7 fat cows, 7 lean cows, and basically throughout the chapter, Joseph is the only one who can interpret the dream. He doesn't have to guess the dream like Daniel did, but he just has to interpret it. And Pharaoh's reaction is that, could we find another like him, a man in whom is the spirit of Elohim? So he recognizes this. He has the revelation that this is the truth of my dream, recognizes that this can only be from the spirit of Elohim, the true God, the spirit of God, the true Elohim. And goes on to say, then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since Elohim has shown you all this, there is no one as discerning and wise as you. Be over my house, you yourself, and at your mouth all my people shall kiss. Only in the throne I am greater than you. So you're the greatest one here. I just get the chair, I get the name tag, I get the seat, but everything comes from you. And Pharaoh took his seal ring off his hand and put it on Joseph's hand, and he dressed him in garments of fine linen and put a gold chain around his neck. And he had him ride in the second chariot which he had. And they cried out before him, bow the knee, and he set him over all the land of Mitzrayim. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, and without a word from you, let no man lift his hand or foot in all the land of Mitzrayim. And Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zephnath Paneah, and he gave him as a wife Asenath, the daughter of Potiphera, priest of On. And Joseph went out over all the land of Mitzrayim. Now Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, sovereign of Mitzrayim, and Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh and went throughout all the land of Mitzrayim. So Joseph becomes the guy. I also want to just make parallel to the giving of the ring from sovereign Ahasuerus to Mordecai and Pharaoh to Joseph, that is a sign of trust and covenant, and basically like here you seal it with the ring. If you've ever seen those wax seals on an envelope and then stamped with the sovereign's ring, you do not duplicate that. No jeweler is going to replicate it. You're not going to be able to make it again. It's only the sovereign. And Pharaoh says, Joseph, you have my seal of approval. And he appointed him governor over Mitzrayim and all his house. These men of Elohim who can interpret dreams and are trustworthy men, those are highly coveted to people in power. And I'm not saying that's what you want to be, but you want to be loyal enough to Elohim where Elohim trusts you to do this and puts you in these positions of authority. Then a scarcity of food and great distress came over all the land of Mitzrayim and Canaan, and our fathers found no food. And this is 41:54 and 42:5, but that's what the dream is about, is that there was 7 years of prosperity and food, 7 fat cows, and then there will be 7 lean years. And it has come into my path that we could be going into 7 lean years, which I believe wholeheartedly. I can't prove, but I've seen my life, and I think that we are definitely the obese America, have been getting that way, have been not only gluttonous, but we have had such prosperity over the last 7 years, and even for it to continue under this Biden regime, there's good argument that things are going to get tight. And I want to say this is why you should have food put back, but you really need people and community and a way to produce food, because 7 years of food for 4 people is like 60 by 60 stacked to the rafters. I mean, 1 bucket of food is about a month for a person, 1 25-gallon bucket, and that is straight, like, common calories, not even Ezekiel bread. So if you've got 1 bucket of food, you need 12 buckets, and 4 times 12. No, that can't be right. Is it a month or is it a week? It's got to be a week. 1,600 calories per pound, which is about a day, half a day if you're planning on being military age male. So yeah, 12 and a half days. Call it 2 weeks. Call it 2-3 weeks. 52 weeks in a year. 2.5 weeks. So 20 buckets, 80 buckets, just like a storage unit. So 80 buckets for a family of 4 to survive for a year. So 7 years, yeah. 7 years is 1,500 buckets of food. So if you've got a family of 4 and you don't have 1,500 buckets of food, and you don't have a way of producing food, and you lose your job entirely and there's no food coming into the grocery store, what are you going to do? And they've got storehouses of grain that they start shoveling grain out of. And this is how, if we go to 42:5, and our fathers found no food, basically the reason, and the sons of Israel went to buy grain among those who journeyed, for the scarcity of food was in the land of Canaan. And Joseph's 10 brothers, go up to 3, and Joseph's 10 brothers went down to buy grain in Mitzrayim. So because Joseph is the prophet and he has knowledge to store grain up, he tells the Pharaoh, start storing grain so that we have food over the 7 lean years of famine. Joseph has grain in Mitzrayim. The 10 brothers go down to Mitzrayim to get the grain, not knowing that it's him, but knowing that somebody there has grain. There's grain there to buy, and they can buy it. And so they come to buy it, and they have the food, but our fathers found no food. And so, yeah, because he's the man of Elohim, he gets the foreknowledge to act on preservation of food, and therefore the preservation of life. Is there anything that I missed, Father? Okay. So that is why that's how they end up in Egypt in the first place, Mitzrayim. But Jacob heard that there was grain in Mitzrayim. And he sent out our fathers the first time, and the second time Joseph was made known to his brothers, and Joseph's race became known to Pharaoh. So now the brothers come in, and Joseph is like, look, Pharaoh, these are my brothers. And he now realizes that Joseph is a Hebrew. And Joseph sent and called his father Jacob and all his relatives to him. What's going on? I'm doing a Bible reading for the internet. And Joseph sent and called his father Jacob and all his relatives to him, 75 people. And Jacob went down to Mitzrayim and died, he and our fathers. And they were brought over to Shechem and laid in the tomb that Abraham bought for a price of silver from the sons of Hamor, from the sons of Hamor, the father of Shechem. Shechem was the land of Canaan that the place of Shechem. And Abraham passed through the land to the place of Shechem as far as the terebinth trees of Moreh. At that time the Canaanites were in the land. Hamor was the father of Shechem somewhere. Hamor. I'm gonna say maybe it's Ham, but I don't think that it is. So yeah, minor details. Oh, yeah, I do remember that, but I don't know where it is. Abraham buys this tomb, and then gets laid in it as well. And it's like, the question is, it's like, what is 400 shekels of silver between us? Man, I don't know how. Maybe this is Jacob. Okay, so Genesis 33:18, and Jacob came safely to the city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan, when he came from Padan Aram, and he pitched his tent before the city, and he bought the portion of the field where he had pitched his tent from the children of Hamor, Shechem's father, for 100 kitzah. And he set up a slaughter place there and called it El Elohei Yisrael. So that's Jacob. Yeah, I don't know. I do remember this, but I don't know where it is. It's something like, he just kind of like, what's 400 shekels of silver? Maybe it's earlier on. He does something. He basically saves somebody. Oh. So different story, but it's kind of funny. Genesis 23:10, and Ephron dwelt among the sons of Heth. Ephron the Hittite answered Abraham in the hearing of the sons of Heth, all who entered at the gate of his city, saying, No, my master, listen to me. I shall give you the field and the cave that is in it, and I shall give it to you in the presence of the sons of my people. I shall give it to you. Bury your dead. And Abraham bowed himself down before the people of the land, and he spoke to Ephron in the hearing of the people of the land, saying, If only you would hear me. I shall give the amount of silver for the field. Take it from me, and let me bury my dead there. And Ephron answered Abraham, saying to him, My master, listen to me. The land is worth 400 shekels of silver. What is that between you and me? So bury your dead. And Abraham listened to Ephron, and Abraham weighed out the silver for Ephron, which he had named in the hearing of the sons of Heth, 400 shekels of silver, currency of the merchants. Thus the field of Ephron was in Machpelah, which was before Mamre, the field, and the cave which was in it, and all the trees that were in the field, which were within all the surrounding borders, were deeded to Abraham as a possession in the presence of the sons of Heth, before all who went into the gate of that city. And after this, Abraham buried Sarah his wife in the cave of the field of Machpelah before Mamre, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. Thus the field and the cave that is in it were deeded to Abraham by the sons of Heth as property for a burial site. So yeah. It's in the land of Canaan. So again, he's got a couple of details mixed up here, but we're finding them, and it's just like, Father's telling me that these are not details that are mixed up. But I don't know what that means exactly. He and her fathers, and they were brought over to Shechem and laid in the tomb that Abraham bought for a price of silver from the sons of Hamor, the father of Shechem. So Ephron is of the sons of Hamor, and Hamor is the father of Shechem, wherever that may be found in here. Somewhere. Where is that exactly? I don't know where that is. And they didn't know where it was either because they didn't put it in here. So, all right, let's go. We're gonna skip through that. But as the time of the promise drew near, which Elohim had sworn to Abraham, the people increased and multiplied in Mitzrayim until another sovereign arose who did not know Joseph. That is Exodus 1:8, and that is the transition point between the children of Israel thriving in Egypt and where they become slaves. So because of the respect and the witness of Elohim that Joseph has shown to the Pharaoh, he basically gets a pass on anything, and all his brothers are like welcomed in. They don't become slaves. They get to eat and live with Joseph, and everything's happily ever after. And even Joseph, okay, let's just start at 1:1 of Exodus. And these are the names of the children of Israel who came to Mitzrayim with Jacob, each one with his household: Reuben, Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda, Issachar, Zebulun, Benjamin, Dan and Naphtali, Gad and Asher. And all those who were descendants of Jacob were 70 beings, as Joseph was already in Mitzrayim. And Joseph died, and all his brothers, and all that generation. So I believe it's 75 were in Mitzrayim, and the 5 is Joseph's family. And all his relatives to him, 75 people. All Joseph and Jacob and all his relatives, 75 people. 3 kids, Joseph and a wife. And the children of Israel were fruitful and increased very much, multiplied and became very strong, and the land was filled with them. Then a new sovereign arose over Mitzrayim, who did not know Joseph, and he said to the people, "See, the people of the children of Israel are more and stronger than we. Come, let us act wisely toward them, lest they increase. And it shall be when fighting befalls us, that they shall join us, our enemies, and fight against us, and shall go up out of the land." So this Pharaoh gets worried about the strength and numbers of the people of Israel being in Mitzrayim, and so they set slave masters over them to afflict them with their burdens, and they built for Pharaoh supply cities, Pithom and Ramses. That's his solution, is there's too many of them, they're going to rebel, we're going to enslave them. So again, the Jews get rounded up and enslaved. Well, this is the first time actually, but yeah, how many other times in life. And he gave him the covenant. Oh no, we're not there. Okay. Having dealt treacherously with our race, this one mistreated our fathers, making them expose their babies so that they should not live. We're going to keep the flippies. This is not... Then the sovereign, verse 15, Exodus 1:15, then the sovereign of Mitzrayim spoke to the Hebrew midwives, of whom the name of one was Shiphrah and the name of the other was Puah. Well, we already made it to 10, or we already made it to 11. Verse 12, but the more they afflicted them, the more they increased and grew, and they were in dread of the children of Israel. Sounds like something that Yah would do. You're going to torture my people? I'm going to give them more people. And the Mitzrites made the children of Israel serve with harshness, and they made their lives bitter with hard bondage in mortar and in brick, and in all kinds of work in the field. All their work which they had made them to do was with harshness. Then the sovereign of Mitzrayim spoke to the Hebrew midwives, of whom the name of one was Shiphrah, and the name of the other Puah. And he said, when you deliver the Hebrew women, and see them on the birth stools, if it is a son, then you shall put him to death. But if it is a daughter, then she shall live. But the midwives feared Elohim and did not do as the sovereign of Mitzrayim commanded them, and kept the male children alive. So the sovereign of Mitzrayim called for the midwives and said to them, why have you done this and kept the male children alive? And the midwives said to Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not like the Mitzrite women, for they are lively and give birth before the midwives come to them. So Elohim was good to the midwives, and the people increased and became very numerous. And it came to be, because the midwives feared Elohim, that he provided households for them. And Pharaoh commanded all his people, saying, throw every son who is born into the river, and keep alive every daughter. So that is Pharaoh's solution: kill the boys and save the girls. But when he was exposed, the daughter, and at that time Moshe was born, and he was pleasing to Elohim, and he was reared 3 months in the house of his father. But when he was exposed, the daughter of Pharaoh took him up and reared him as her own son. So Moses is... And a man of the house of Levi went and married a daughter of Levi, and the woman conceived and bore a son, and she saw that he was a lovely child, and she hid him 3 months. And when she could hide him no longer, she took an ark of wicker for him, and coated it with tar and pitch, and put the child in it. and laid it in the reeds by the edge of the river. And his sister stood at a distance to know what would be done to him. And the daughter of Pharaoh came down to wash herself at the river, and her young women were walking by the riverside. And when she saw the ark among the reeds, she sent her female servant to get it, and opened it, and saw the child, and see, the baby wept. So she had compassion on him, and said, "This is the one of the children of the Hebrews." And his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and call a nurse for you from the Hebrew women to nurse the child for you?" And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go." And the young woman went and called the child's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child away and nurse him for me. Then I shall pay your wages." So the woman took the child and nursed him. And the child grew. And she brought him to the Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. And she called his name Moshe, saying, "Because I have drawn him out of the water." And Moshe was instructed in all the wisdom of the Mitzrites, and he was mighty in words and works. And when he was 40 years old, it came into his heart to visit his brothers, the children of Israel. So they skipped the part where Moshe is exiled from Pharaoh. He basically, when Moshe was grown, it came to be that he went out to his brothers and looked at their burdens, and he saw a Mitzrite striking a Hebrew, one of his brothers. So he turned this way and that way, and when he saw no one, he struck the Mitzrite and hid him in the sand. And so this verse 22, Acts 7, he was instructed in all the wisdom of the Mitzrites and was mighty in words and works. You know, he was mighty in works. Didn't do much for the Mitzrites, not at all. I mean, he kills a Mitzrite, and then an Israelite says, "Are you going to kill?" And so a Mitzrite hits an Israelite, and then he kills the Mitzrite. Moses kills the Mitzrite, and then an Israelite hits an Israelite and says to Moses, "Are you going to kill me now too?" And then Moses runs away and ends up in Yithro, and then that's chapter 3 where he meets Yahweh in the burning bush, which we're about to get into. And when he was 40 years old, it came into his heart to visit his brothers, the children of Israel. And seeing one of them being wronged, he defended and revenged him who was oppressed, smiting the Mitzrite. Again, I don't see it being a 40 years old thing. Maybe this is a detail that he knew that did not get recorded. I'm sure that Pharaoh in this time probably was just great between as the child grew, and she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. And she called his name Moshe, saying, "Because I have drawn him out of the water." And in those days it came to be when Moshe was grown that he went out to his brothers and looked at their burdens. So apparently he is 40 years old and goes out and looks at their burdens and then strikes the Mitzrite. He's grown. And visits the children of Israel, and seeing one of them being wronged, he defended and revenged him who was oppressed, smiting the Mitzrite. And he thought that his brothers would have understood that Elohim would give deliverance to them by his hand, but they did not understand. And the next day appeared to two of them as they were fighting, and urged them to peace, saying, "Men, you are brothers, why do you wrong one another?" So not only, let's read that. So he struck the Mitzrite in verse 12, verse 13, and he went out the second day and saw two Hebrew men fighting, and he said to the one who did the wrong, "Why do you strike your neighbor?" And he said, "Who made you a head and a judge over us? Do you intend to kill me as you killed the Mitzrite?" And Moshe feared and said, truly the matter is known." And so the way I told this story without reading it verbatim was that Moses killed a Mitzrite, defended the Israelite from the Mitzrite, and then was just straight threatened by the two Israelites, and that was not exactly the truth, because what happened was he does say, "Why do you strike your neighbor?" So his works are that he's saving his brother from a foreign oppressor, and his words are that he is making peace among his brothers. So Moshe indeed was mighty in words and works, confirming Acts 7:22. And he thought that his brothers would have understood that Elohim would give deliverance to them by his hand, saying like, hey, like, this is why I'm doing this for you guys. But they didn't quite get that. They did not understand. And the next day he appeared to two of them as they were fighting and urged them to peace, saying, men, you are brothers. Why do you wrong one another? And he who was wronging his neighbor pushed him away, saying, who made you a ruler and a judge over us? Do you wish to kill me as you killed the Mitzrayite yesterday? And at this saying, Moshe fled and became a sojourner in the land of Midian, where he fathered 2 sons. And Pharaoh heard of this matter, and he sought to kill Moshe, but Moshe fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. And the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water, and they filled the troughs to water their father's flocks. But the shepherds came and drove them away. Then Moshe stood up and came to their rescue and watered their flock. And they came to Reuel, their father, and he said, how is it that you have come so soon today? And they said, a Mitzray rescued us from the hand of the shepherds, and he also drew enough water for us and watered the flock. So Moshe is a very chivalrous man also. He's not just doing he's not just he doesn't just watch. He goes and helps them and saves them from the shepherds, and then proceeds to water their flocks, which we saw as the sign from Abraham's servant to between, like, the sign of the covenant between Abraham's servant and God, if that's the right phraseology. He says, let the woman who waters my camels be the wife of Isaac. And so she is. So it's Rebecca. She goes home, and these 7 girls go home and tell their father about what Moses did. And he said to his daughters, and where is he? Why did you leave the man? Call him and let him eat bread. And Moshe agreed to dwell with the man, and he gave Zipporah his daughter to Moshe. And she bore him a son and called him Gershom, and for he said, I have become a sojourner in a foreign land. And it came to be, after these many days, that the sovereign of Mitzrayim died, and the children of Israel groaned because of the slavery. And they cried out, and their cry came up to the Elohim because of the slavery. And Elohim heard their groaning, and Elohim remembered his covenant with Abraham and with Yitzchak and with Jacob. And Elohim looked on the children of Israel, and Elohim knew. Elohim knew, exclamation point. He sees the children of Israel, and he knows. He knows what's going on. He knows something weird's happening. And he remembers the covenant that he made, and Moses is blessed with this man's daughter for his works. And it came to be, after many days, the sovereign of Mitzrayim died. And so new king comes around, and so basically this sets the scene for Moses can go back, because now the Pharaoh's not trying to kill him anymore. But verse 30, Acts chapter 7, and after 40 years were completed, a messenger of Yahweh appeared to him in a flame of fire in a bush in the wilderness of Mount Sinai. Take it, chapter 3, verse 1, and Moshe was shepherding the flock of Yithro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the back of the wilderness, and came to Horeb, the mountain of Elohim. And the messenger of Yahweh appeared to him in a flame of fire from the midst of a bush, and he looked and saw the bush burning with fire, but the bush was not consumed. So this is an eternal flame. Then I am out here doing a Bible reading.
I looked around for you for a little bit, and I was like, oh.
Yeah. What's going on? Yeah. Feel free to join me if you got a Bible. I'm doing, I read the word for YouTube, trying to teach the people. And I am doing Acts chapter 7, which is full of references. So I'm currently 2 hours in to flipping between Acts 7 and Genesis and Exodus, telling the story summary of the Israelites from Abraham.
Right. Stephen's report.
Yes, Stephen's report. Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty amazing.
Right. So it appears that this is another 40 years, but I don't know that that's true.
What is?
It says that in verse 23 it says, and when he was 40 years old, it came into his heart to visit his brothers, the children of Israel. I don't know if you want to be on camera. Then in verse 30 it says, and after 40 years were completed, a messenger of Yahweh appeared to him in a flame of fire in a bush in the wilderness of Mount Sinai. So sounds like 40 more years, so like Moshe would be 80 years old, and I guess that could be true, because then in Deuteronomy, when he dies, he's
120.
120.
He's 80 in the wilderness.
Yeah.
When he comes back to his people.
Yeah.
40 when he leaves from Egypt. So it's the first 40, the second 40, and the third 40.
And the third 40. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Okay. So, in fact, 40, 40, 40. Verse 31. Do you need a Bible?
No, I have a Bible.
Okay. And Moshe, seeing it, marveled at the sight, and coming near to look, the voice of Yahweh came to him. Because what would you do if a bush was being burned and not being consumed? Saying, I am the Elohim of your fathers, the Elohim of Abraham, and the Elohim of Ithaca, and the Elohim of Jacob. And Moshe trembled, and did not have the courage to look. But Yahweh said to him, take your sandals off your feet, for the place where you stand is set apart ground. I have certainly seen the evil treatment of my people, who are in Mitzrayim, and I have heard their groaning, and have come down to deliver them. And now come, let me send you to Mitzrayim. So this is 3:6-10, and this is the introduction that Moses gets to Yahweh.
Yeah, I just read this pretty recently.
Did you?
Yeah, I read the whole passage.
In Exodus or Acts?
Yeah, in Exodus. I was considering it.
I have been joined by Hushai, who is actually from the same town that I am. And let's see. Yeah. Let's see if we can get you. This table's not quite big enough. Oh, cool. All right, sweet. All right, move in. Yeah, we're not strangers. It's not anymore. We were. It's funny, they keep asking, like, were you friends? And I was like, no, we are now, But like, no, like, we didn't just, like, telecommunicate with me, Like, there's a guy that I left back home who needs to come visit me right now. Although that would be cool,
Oh, yeah. Lots of prayers going up.
Yeah. Okay. So, and he said, I am the Elohim of your father, the Elohim of Abraham, the Elohim of Yitzchak, and the Elohim of Jacob. And Moshe concealed his face, for he was afraid to look at Elohim. And Yahweh said, I have indeed seen the oppression of my people who are in Mitzrayim, and have heard their cry because of their slave drivers, for I know their sorrows. And I have come down to deliver them from the hand of the Mitzrites, and to bring them up from that land to a good and spacious land, to a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites, and the Hittites, and the Amorites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites. And now, see, the cry of the children of Israel has come to me, and I have also seen the oppression with which the Mitzrites oppress them. And now, come, I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Mitzrayim. And so that is a heck of a commission. So, a beautiful one that Moses accepts. Abraham accepts it right away. And Moses has some questions about how exactly he's going to get it done, but it's not very long before he's fully convinced. So I'm in verse 35. This Moshe, whom they had refused, saying, "Who made you a ruler and a judge?" That was what the two Israelites fighting said to him. This one Elohim sent to be a ruler, and a deliverer by the hand of the messenger who appeared to him in the bush. The messenger, the capital M messenger, often thought to be Yeshua. I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
The messenger.
Yeah.
There are several places the messenger is mentioned, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There is a messenger in, you're referring to the messenger in Exodus 23.
Yeah, 23.
It says, "For my messenger will go before you and bring you into the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Canaanites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites."
Yeah.
And then he goes on and talks about him there, Exodus 23, 23.
Mm-hmm.
It mentions it several places.
Yeah.
"Behold, I will send my messenger before you to keep you in the way, to bring you into the place which I have prepared. Beware of him and obey his voice. Do not provoke him, for he will not pardon your transgressions, for my name is in him."
I even like Genesis 32, where Jacob wrestles with, I don't know what your translation says. Some say a man, some say God, some say a messenger. What does mine say? A capital M man wrestled with him, verse 24, until the breaking of day.
Yeah. Was that word Gabar? I can't remember. If it was a man meaning a mighty man, Gabar, like a man of war.
Okay. I don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of like using the word soldier.
Okay.
If it's Gabar, it's not necessarily a human,
Okay.
like Ish or.
Talking more of Nephilim?
Yep.
Okay.
Well, it seems that this angelic, it does talk about.
Right, like I wrestled with God and have
Right.
and have lived.
Exactly.
So, messenger, capital M, appears to him in the bush. I guess, that's a different context, but often thought to be Yeshua himself. Verse 36, this one led them out in Exodus 23 we were just talking about, after he had done wonders and signs in the land of Mitzrayim and in the Red Sea and in the wilderness 40 years. He being Moshe, does signs and wonders, obviously by the hand of Yah. This is the Moshe who said to the children of Israel, Yahweh your Elohim shall raise up for you a prophet like me from your brothers. Him you shall hear. This is Deuteronomy 18:15, which we talk about quite often. But Yahweh your Elohim shall raise up for you a prophet like me from your midst, from your brothers. Listen to him, according to all you asked of Yahweh your Elohim in Horeb in the day of the assembly, saying, let me not hear again the voice of Yahweh my Elohim, nor let me see this great fire any more, lest I die. So this is Exodus 19, I believe, that they're terrified. And they're like, we do not want to go up there.
In chapter 19 is when he establishes the boundaries around the mountain, and then it goes on and talks about cloud descending, the voice, the lightning, and then 20 is the 10 commandments, but the people respond to the commandments.
Where do they say, please do not make us go up there?
Verse 19, 2019.
Oh, 2019. Okay.
Says,
Okay.
you speak with us and we will hear, but let not Elohim speak with us lest we die.
Yeah, so they're terrified of Elohim, as they should be. And so that is the day that they made the covenant, and that is the day that they asked of him in Horeb. Do not fear, for Elohim has come to prove you, and in order that his fear be before you, so that you do not sin. And the prophet is Yeshua, as it turns out, which is really the point that Stephanos is making here, getting to, because he gave the whole backstory of Israel, and now he is to the point of prophecy of a prophet that is worth hearing. This is he who was in the assembly in the wilderness with the messenger who spoke to him on Mount Sinai, and with our fathers, who received the living words to give to us, unto whom our fathers would not become obedient, but thrust away, and in their hearts they turned back to Mitzrayim, saying to Aaron, make us mighty ones to go before us. For this Moshe, who led us out of the land of Mitzrayim, we do not know what has become of him. So, he who was in the assembly in the wilderness, Moses, with the messenger, capital M messenger, who spoke to him on Mount Sinai, and with our fathers who received the living words, the 10 Commandments. Obviously, Yeshua is the living word also, the word made flesh, the word from the beginning. But these words, 10 Commandments, 10 words, I think that they're written in Hebrew.
The Devarim, 10 words Devarim?
Yeah. They're, does Devarim mean words?
Devar, yeah. It's like my daughter's name is Shomra Devorah, but it's from the same root, yeah, Devar.
Devarim. So, because I have that as the title of, like, the Hebrew translation of the title of Deuteronomy.
Oh, interesting.
So, I think, is Devarim second words?
It could be.
Second word? Okay.
It could be, yeah, second word.
Okay. Debar is the word. Somewhere it says, yeah, okay. Deuteronomy 3:13, and he made known to you his covenant, which he commanded you to do, the 10 words, and he wrote them on 2 tablets of stone. So, those are the words given to us, unto whom our fathers would not become obedient. Are you using King James?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, New King James, excuse me.
New King James?
Yeah, I got, if this translation doesn't work.
No, whatever you prefer. I just wasn't sure. Like, and you guys, have you all leather bound your Bibles?
No, the same fellow did this for me.
Awesome. Well,
Yeah. I had a copy of the New King James, pocket-sized.
okay.
For years. Cover fell apart. He made one for me with a different cover.
Nice.
And then I had that one, another, I want to say 7 years. And then I lived with him again here in Ithaca, and Lev found a matching Bible, and he gave it to Rakam to leather bind for me so I could replace the one I had.
Nice.
It had reached a breaking point.
Oh.
Things age faster when you have children.
I can imagine. Ourselves included,
Yeah,
right?
everything accelerates.
Unto whom our fathers would not become obedient, but thrust away, and in their hearts they turned back to Mitzrayim, saying to Aaron, make us mighty ones to go before us. For this Moshe, who led us out of the land of Mitzrayim, we do not know what has become of him. So they're afraid, basically, that Moses has been consumed by what they feared in Exodus 20:19, and they come to ask Aaron for a golden calf, which he makes them, and then Moses comes down and finds the tablets. We went over this in the 3,000 who are slayed, and then returned in Acts 2. And all over, we know about the 40-year pilgrimage. We talked about that in Deuteronomy 1, but it is the rebellion. Let's see if we can go to Numbers 14. The 14, 16.
The rebellion, you're referring to Korah?
I'm referring to None of you, 14:30, none of you except Caleb, son of Yephuneh,
Oh, yes.
and Yehoshua,
This
son
is
of
before
Nun,
Quran.
shall enter the land which I swore I would make you dwell in, but your little ones, whom you said would become a prey, I shall bring in, and they shall know the land which you have rejected. But as for you, your carcasses are going to fall in this wilderness, and your sons shall be wanderers in the wilderness 40 years, and shall bear your whorings until your carcasses are consumed in the wilderness. According to the number of the days in which you spied out the land, 40 days, a day for a year, a day for a year, you are to bear your crookedness 40 years, and you shall know my breaking off. I am Yahweh, I have spoken, I shall do this to all this evil congregation who are meeting against me. In this wilderness they are consumed, and there they die. So this is because they reject the promised land, which is obviously a broader disobedience. And
Well, it says they didn't mix what they heard with faith, right? Hebrews.
let's go there.
It says, who,
Where are we at?
in verse 15, it says, while it is said, this is, chapter 3, verse 15.
3:15.
Says, it is said, today if you will hear his voice, do not harden your hearts, as in the rebellion. For who, having heard, rebelled? Indeed, was it not all who came out of Mizraim, led by Moshe? Now, with whom was he angry 40 years? Was it not with those who sinned, whose corpses fell in the wilderness? And to whom did he swear that they would not enter his rest, but to those who did not obey? So we see that they could not enter in because of unbelief. Therefore, since a promise remains of entering his rest, let us fear lest any of you seem to have come short of it. For indeed the gospel was preached to us as well as to them. But the word which they heard did not profit them, not being mixed with faith in those who heard it. For we who have believed do enter that rest. So we see here something that's very controversial amongst Christians, the linking together of obedience and belief, which that you have to do something to show that you believe. Belief isn't arbitrarily stated in the heart and agreed upon in heaven, contract signed, it's between me and God, because I somehow aspire to, whatever, be a son of God. So somehow, because I want it and I say the magic words, I'm in. But everything in the scriptures is based on obedience. The whole scriptures, Acts 5:21, makes it very clear that he doesn't give his Holy Spirit except to those who obey him. So this belief was the same gospel that was preached to them, a gospel of belief unto obedience. And it didn't profit them to hear that because they refused the obedience. Theirs was an obedience which also they couldn't keep, much like, no one in their fallen human nature can keep to perfect adherence to, rules or standards. So we have a sacrificial system. We have a sin offering. But in rejecting our Father's hand through the sacrificial system, they rejected his closeness, his presence, which Moshe and Joshua and Caleb, they were drawn to. They loved our Father's presence. So there's something there that communicates belief. They wanted our Father's closeness. So they obeyed him. They loved him. They listened to him, and they clung to him. But that first generation was a sign, a symbol to us of what it looks like to have sort of a mental belief. You can all get baptized into Moshe and come out corpses in the wilderness if we're not willing to walk through our obedience, which is the same thing. Stephanus, is that what you called him in the Greek?
Yeah.
Which sometimes we call him Nazir by the Hebrew, but he...
Nazir?
Nazir, or Nazir.
Okay.
It means crown. It's same name in Hebrew as a Greek. You know, the Greek Stephanus. It's my middle name, Stephen. But he, the same thing he brings out when was that they didn't receive the prophets in their day. That's why they covered their ears and ran at him to stone him.
Yeah, totally.
They didn't want to hear the message that would have profited them if they mixed it with faith.
It's so interesting. I have here Psalm 95, 7 and 8, which we can look at real quick.
Right, Psalm 95.
I've had people use Hebrews 4 saying that our rest is in Messiah, and so that's why we don't have to do the Sabbath. But when you look at this with the context of chapter 3, as in the rest is in the obedience.
Right.
You know, so like you can rest in knowing that you're obedient by doing the works of Messiah, and the desire of Messiah. And so we'll just read Psalm 95 real quick. Come, let us sing to Yahuwah. Let us raise a shout to the rock of our deliverance. Let us come before his face with thanksgiving. Let us raise a shout to him in song. For Yahuwah is a great El, and a great sovereign above all mighty ones, in whose hand are the depths of the earth. The mountain peaks are his also. His is the sea, for he made it, and his hand formed the dry land. Come, let us bow down and bend low. Let us kneel before Yahuwah our Maker, for he is our Elohim, and we are the peoples of his pasture, and the sheep of his hand. Today, if you would hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as in Meribah, and as in the day of Massa in the wilderness, when your fathers tried me, have provoked me, though they saw my work. For 40 years I was grieved with that generation, and said, they are a people who go astray in their hearts, and they do not know my ways. As I swore in my wrath, if they enter into my rest. That's where it ends, which I think is an interestingly beautiful place for it to end in the context of rest through obedience.
Sure. And then here, this is a little known aspect of the Greek here, little known among those who don't read the Greek, but
which I don't. So,
well, this particular one has quite a statement. It says, "For if Joshua had given them rest," speaking of Joshua, the prophet and leader,
with the book,
the Moshe's Shirat, his servant. Says if Joshua had given them rest, then he would not afterward have spoken of another day. There remains therefore, and this word here is a very interesting word. It's literally translated, there remains therefore a Sabbath keeping. It's an active, current, now verb. It means now there is a Sabbath keeping for the people of Elohim, for he who has entered into his rest has himself also ceased from his works, as Elohim did from his. Let us therefore be diligent to enter that rest. So this is speaking of, there's a Sabbath day, there's a Sabbath year, there's a Sabbath age, but the fulfillment of that Sabbath is the release that comes through being forgiven, giving up our own works. You can see the effect of this in Abraham's life when you see that he heard the message, leave your country, leave your people, go to the land I show you. He obeys. He hears the message to give this certain sacrifice. He gives it, fends off the vultures. Our Father speaks to him, right? There's this incredible covenant made, Genesis 15. Tells him, I'm going to give you the enemy-free land. It's going to happen. It's coming. Then you follow it through, and what happens? He's motivated. He's encouraged. He's full of faith. It says he believed our Father, right? He looked at the heavens. He believed him. And then it says he heeded the voice of his wife and decided, I got it. Ishmael, right? This whole thing with Ishmael. Takes Hagar, has a son, right? Ishmael, right? Means man of Elohim. Wow. Well, it wasn't our Father's doing. It was his own works.
Yeah.
So we see 13 years, nothing written. We've said our Father remained silent. Let him walk that out live it out, experience it. And the first thing he says is, he appears to Abraham and says, I am El Shaddai. Walk before me and be blameless. In other words, I'm the mighty one. I'm going to do it. I said it and I'm going to do it. Not you. You keep yourself blameless. That's your job. You understand? My job is to do it. Your job is to be blameless. Okay? And so Abraham's, obviously this is the first thing really that's impacted him in 13 years since this incredible event of seeing our Father's hand in his life, made a covenant with him, and then he's just floored. And our Father says, now here's the sign of the covenant, circumcision. And he tells him, cut off the foreskins. I'm going to give you a son. It's going to be by your wife Sarah. His name's going to be Ithaca. This is how it's going to be. I'm doing it. And the story goes on where he's, at this point, there's another story that's told from Genesis 17 through 22, the story of our Father's works in Abraham's life. Abraham rested from his own labors. Ishmael had to depart after a few years. And our Father's labors produced a son that was able to yield to his Abba to the point of death. A father who was able to raise his only son of the promise and then yield him to the voice of Elohim and say, okay, well, he must be wanting me to give him, so he'd raise him from the dead, I guess, because why would he tell me to kill him? He told me he's the son of the promise. Everything about this land is based in him. Mm-hmm. So everything about that story has to do with entering our Father's rest. The Sabbath was being explained through a life. This is really important for us to understand, because Abraham did obey before, but it was different. It wasn't until he rested from his own labors that our Father was able to really show, I am Elohim.
And that's a great point too, because I've been thinking about that lately too. It seems like when you just wait for, like, this got brought up at Shabbat as well, is that like the word was wait. The guy who gave like the sermon for the Sabbath he's like the Father wants you to wait, and it's like it does seem like there's this waiting period. Like even the whole country seems like it's hanging like just like perpetually. You know what I mean? It's like everything's in suspense right now. But I definitely especially feel it in my life is like wait, like don't get in my way type deal. You know what I mean? And remain blameless, just like you said. You know what I mean? And so as I was talking with Hawkins earlier, and there was just this sense of like I'm watching him just sit and chill, and like we're out by the lake, and he's just hanging out, like hanging back, and I'm like, man, like how can you just sit here? You know what I mean? Like, and just hang out, and just like I can, even on Shabbat, it's like I will sleep, and I will do like what I consider restful things. Like I won't cook, I won't do dishes, I won't even make my bed. Yeah. You know what I mean? But as far as like doing nothing, like I'm still like mentally progressing myself at least to my understanding, you know what I mean, to make my life better, doing little things to make my life better, even if rest is that thing, you know what I mean, rejuvenation, rebuilding the cell structure in my body, you know what I mean. So it's interesting to hear you say that to be blameless and let me do the rest and rest, and like that will allow Yah to work the works that he wants to work. You know what I mean? Yeah. That is not my specialty. And I thought that is why I quit smoking, because I genuinely thought that was the big thing. And, even cutting back my caffeine intake. No, I am a wired, like without coffee, without intoxicants at all. No, I go, like I cannot just sit still. Right. And I haven't figured out like if it's a heart condition, or like what it is about me. Like, is it a fear? Is it a defense mechanism? Is it on safety? Is it a spiritual void? Because like I bow every day, you know what I mean? I'm in the word hours a day, you know what I mean? So like I'm not quite figured out where it is, other than that's just the way that I am, and Yah knows it, and he knows he's going to have to work differently in my life than he would in yours, because he built all of us individually. You know what I mean?
Right.
We're not all the same.
For sure, we all are born with dispositions. Like it says that you don't go to a fig tree for grape clusters, and things like that. We're all different. And so some of us are just wired differently. And then there's iniquity, which is an inwrought condition that's bent by society, our parental upbringing, our own choices sometimes, consistent choices. There's a bent in us to certain things that we have to wrestle with, wrestle against internally. We all have something like this also. But the most important thing we've come to is what it says in these matters. If you take James 1:21, it's really clear.
Well, we got way off topic. But
I'm sorry.
This is all important stuff.
It's my fault.
No, it's cool. I appreciate you sitting down with me. Thank you.
Oh, sure,
I was hoping that I'd get somebody to do some of this with me.
Yeah. In James 1:21, it says, "Lay aside all filthiness and overflow of wickedness." Yours probably says something different. There are several different translations.
Yeah.
What does yours say there?
Put away all filthiness and overflow of evil.
Overflow of evil.
Oh.
Yep. Or abundance, or superfluity, or whatever. Just
Is that really in a translation?
I think so.
Superfluity?
Yeah, superfluity. The stuff that flows out of us.
That's a Hebrew word.
Yeah. Out. And flows out of us. And receive with meekness the implanted word, which is able to save your souls. So we understand that it's not us saving ourselves. We do have to lay aside filthiness. We have to deal with the overflow of wickedness. But that isn't enough. We have to receive with meekness the implanted word. This is something that comes from outside of ourselves. We can't speak the word to ourselves. We have to receive the word. Just like it says, of anyone who's saved, they receive a sent one, right? In the book of Romans, it talks about this. Romans 10 talks about sent ones. And John 7, John 13, Matthew. Anyways, there's lots of places. It talks about receiving sent ones. But we go to one another, we speak the word, speak the truth in love to one another. And there's a word that saves us. It comes from outside of ourselves. But we have to do our part, walk before Him and be blameless. What we can, what we do know, what we do see, we confess and forsake. And then we put ourselves in a meek place where our Father can speak to us and say, "Be still. I'm doing it."
Be still and know that I am Elohim.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, that smacked me in the face. That's in Proverbs twice. I think it's 91 and 104, maybe?
Maybe, yeah. And Psalm 131 says, "Surely I've calmed and quieted my soul like a weaned child with his mother. Like a weaned child, my soul is within me." So just calming and quieting. There's some things we can do and some things we can't, but what we are commanded to do is to have a higher preoccupation with our Father's will. We give ourselves to the fire of our Father's Ahava love, to service, to giving our lives to one another, building one another up. And when there's other stuff that gets in the way, when something begins to work in us to divide the body, we have work to do. We have to deal with that. This is given to us. This is our work. Be blameless. That's my work. Oh, it's not blameless to have a bad attitude with my neighbor, or with my wife, or with my son, or anyone that I'm in a covenant with. I don't have the right to have the inner workings of offense. Our master said, you're not even justified to revile an evil person. You pray for those who persecute you. You bless those who curse you. Someone slaps you, you give them your other cheek. You give your back to their labors another mile. You're just like,
Well, and that's spiritual perfection, is being able to completely accomplish that. Even, I've heard of people here losing their cool, but even like last night, I think it was Uriah,
Yeah.
was saying about like when you're having hard times with people,
Right.
it's a spiritual issue, not I'm out way out of camera. It's a spiritual issue, not like a physical issue.
Right.
And it's because you're in the physical too much. You're thinking about like your space and your
Right.
Your needs and yourself
Right.
and your selfishness more than
Right.
their.
Right. That's what Philippians, what Apostle Shaul is pointing out when he points out that those who are enemies of the cross have their minds set on earthly matters, earthly things. It says that their God is their belly, their Elohim is their inner workings, their matrix. So everything going on down here in your inner workings and everything going on right here in the mundane physical world, the tangible, touchable physical world, there's a lot to worry about in here and right here. And if you don't deal with that stuff, you're going to have issues. Obviously, you got to make a meal. People need to eat. You got to clean up. You can't live in squalor. But if we don't seek our Father, like it says in Colossians 3, set our minds on things above, then by nature we tend to get lost in those other aspects of life, the way of the Gentiles, worrying about what we shall eat, what we shall wear, what we shall drink.
Where is that in Philippians?
That's Philippians 3. I think it's 18. Yeah.
For many of whom I have often told you, and now say to you, even weeping, walk as enemies of the stake of Messiah. Their end is destruction, their mighty one is their stomach, and their esteem is in their shame. They mind the earthly. For our citizenship is in the heavens, from which we also eagerly wait for the Savior, the Master Yeshua Messiah, who shall change our lowly body to be conformed to his esteemed body, according to the working by which he is able to even to bring all under his control.
Right.
See, I see words like that, and I see like stomach, right? So it's like, I think just like the stomach, the gluttony, the eating.
Right.
I don't know if yours has a different translation, or if you...
Mine says, is their belly, but the Greek is the word matrix, has to do with, which has to do with your inner workings. So just like your intestines, if you stretched them out, would just go miles. And it's like everything you eat passes through this, like miles and miles. It's not in a straight line. Yeah. It's contained within this like little box inside of your belly between your ribs and your pelvis. Yeah. And it just keeps going around and around until you've worked it all out. And that's like your inner workings. And that's what your belly is made of. So it's a picture of something spiritual. For example, someone says something that gets in your craw. You don't like the way they said it. They come to you and they say, why are you just sitting out here? You think you're so religious, right? You're just sitting out here reading this thing. Why don't you go do something with your life, And like you're kind of like, oh, no, whatever with you. But you don't really think about it. But you're offended deep down inside, and you're insecure. And something starts working in you where you're like, what was his deal? Whatever. Oh, I should forgive him. I'm going to forgive him. Yeah, I'll forgive him. That's what Yeshua says. Forgive him. You start going through all this stuff, right? Inner workings, and then but a few minutes later, there it is again. And it spins around again. Yeah, well, why is it always like this? Why is it? Maybe is he going to destruction? Maybe I am kind of strange. What's going on? And it goes on like this. Sometimes you'll replay the same event hundreds of times, thinking about how you could have said something. I should have said this. Man, maybe I'll see him again. I've seen him before. He probably lives in town. If I see him again, this is what I'll say. And this stuff goes on and on. It's our inner workings. It's the stuff the cross was supposed to deal with. The crucifixion of our flesh deals with the inner workings. It kills the access to that thing. It burns our bridges, you could say, back to our old fleshly way of relating. And crucifixion is humiliating. It's self-denial. It's public shame. It's like that man who had to extend his withered arm. He didn't want to be in front of all of those hard-hearted Pharisees, sticking out the most despicable part of his body that was all shriveled up. He'd been mocked his whole life, couldn't amount to anything, and our master just says, stand in the middle. He's like, and they're all scrutinizing. It's the Sabbath, everyone's staring at him, and he says, stretch out your hand. So this thing, the amazing thing, he actually does it. He sticks out his damaged hand before everyone to see, and it's made whole like the other. So we crucify our flesh by exposing our withered condition, the way that we shamefully have lived. And we don't just say, well, I should just forgive them. We say, man, I got so offended. That fella said that thing to me. I'm so insecure. Hey, brother, can I talk to you? I'm so insecure. I give into this stuff. Someone came to me and said something about me being religious and da-da-da. And I feel like I get angry, I get offended, and then I go through all this stuff inside, right? This is exactly what your flesh does not want you to do.
To recognize your own deficiencies.
Right, to humiliate yourself.
Yeah.
To say, instead of saying that obvious sinner needs to be dealt with. Yeah. Now you're saying, I'm the sinner. Mm-hmm. That just exposed me.
Well, and this goes back to your point about the last thing the enemy wants you to do is submit and surrender. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And so admitting your faults and being embarrassed and humiliated creates a form of weakness, which you are forced to submit to the weakness that you have, but that's also how you're going to grow in it and strengthen it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So we all, I have a body. I don't know how many trillion cells are in it now. There's all these different numbers people throw out there. 60 trillion cells, I'll just say, some number. Yeah. So, but if one of my cells thinks it's self-sufficient, that's really, really ridiculous. The body could survive without one of those cells. It wouldn't like to survive without it. It's trying to sustain that cell, but it could. The cell cannot survive without all those other cells. It's completely helpless without the body. And so we are just helpless without our connection to the body. We need one another. We need to yield ourselves to one another, submit to one another. Say, we're just this little part of a very big thing our Father's doing. Mm-hmm. And in our very small place, like in that same Psalm 131, it says, I'm not too haughty. I'm not going to concern myself with things too great for me. I'm just a little child. I'm going to quiet my soul, and I'm going to listen, right? It's kind of the lead-in for receive the word in meekness that's able to save your soul. Receive the word implanted. So there's a quieting that has to happen first, a humiliating, a going down. And it says he gives grace to the humble, but opposes the proud. Therefore, humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God. And in due time, he'll raise you up. So anyway, this is what Stephen experienced, Stephanus. And it says the hand of Yahweh was upon him. He was doing miracles, the Holy Spirit. He's speaking from this childlike surrender, living every day just humble. The Holy Spirit's working in him because he's getting to that perfection, the place where you could slap him and he's just not worried about it. They actually went to kill him, right? And he said, forgive them. Yeah. Right? I just told my son that story about our master. It's amazing.
This is why Stephanos is my favorite story. It's just so amazing. It is. I mean, because even Yeshua is he doesn't answer them. He's kind of he gets to a point almost where he's over it. You know what I mean? He takes a sour wine. He says it has been completed. He's I'm good. I'm done. My part's done. Kill me. you know, and Stephanos, like, to the last rock is like, he gets on his knees and prays. Like, they start throwing stones at him and he gets on his knees. But we'll get into that. We've got a couple more verses here. And they made a calf in those days, 41, and brought an offering to the idol, and were rejoicing in the works of their own hands. So Elohim turned and gave them up to worship the host of the heavens. As it has been written in the book of the prophets, did you bring slaughtered beasts and offerings unto me during 40 years in the wilderness, O house of Israel? And you took up the shelter of Molech, and the star of your mighty one, Kiyun, images which you made to bow before them. Therefore I shall remove you beyond Babel. Which is Amos 5:25. You familiar with the book of Amos?
Yeah, to some extent. I mean, they all...
A lot of prophets.
Yeah, exactly. They all are incredible.
Yeah, and very different. Let's see, 5's not too long. We'll just read it real quick. Hear this word which I take up against you, this lamentation, O house of Israel. The maiden of Israel has fallen, not to rise again. She lies forsaken on her land, with no one to lift her up. For thus said the Master Yahuwah, the city that goes out by 1,000 has 100 left, and that which goes out by 100 has 10 left to the house of Israel. For thus said Yahuwah to the house of Israel, seek me and live, but do not seek Beth-el, nor enter Gilgal, nor pass over to Beersheba, for Gilgal shall certainly go into exile, and Beth-el become a nonentity. Seek Yahuwah and live, lest he break out like fire upon the house of Joseph, and shall consume it, with no one to quench it in Beth-el. O you who are turning right ruling to wormwood, and have cast down righteousness to the earth, he who made Kema and Kessel, and who turns the shadow of death into morning, and darkened day into night, who is calling for the waters of the seas, and pours them out on the face of the earth, Yahuwah is his name, who is flashing forth destruction upon the strong, so that destruction comes upon the stronghold. They hated the one who reproves in the gate, and they despise the one who speaks the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, because you trample on the poor, and take grain taxes from him, you have built houses of hewn stone, but you are not going to dwell in them, and you have planted pleasant vineyards, but not drink wine from them. For I know your transgressions are many, and your sins are great, afflicting the righteous and accepting bribes, and turning aside the poor at the gate. Therefore the wise keep silent at that time, for it is an evil time. Seek good and not evil, so that you live, and let Yahuwah Elohim of hosts be with you, as you have spoken. Hate evil and love good, and set up right ruling in the gate. It might be that Yahuwah Elohim of hosts shows favor to the remnant of Joseph. Therefore, Yahuwah Elohim of hosts, Yahuwah said this, there is a wailing in all open squares, and in all the streets they say, alas, alas, and shall call to the farmer to mourning, and skilled lamenters to wailing. Call the farmer to mourning, and skilled lamenters to wailing. And in all vineyards there is wailing, for I pass through your midst, said Yahuwah. Woe to you who are longing for the day of Yahuwah. What does the day of Yahuwah mean to you? It is darkness and not light, as when a man flees from a lion, and a bear shall meet him, or entered his house, rested his hand on the wall, and a serpent shall bite him. Is not the day of Yahuwah darkness and not light? Is it not very dark with no brightness in it? I have despised your festivals, and I am not pleased with your assemblies. Though you offer me ascending offerings and your grain offerings, I do not accept them, nor do I look on your fat and peace offerings. Take away from me the noise of your songs, for I do not hear the sound of your stringed instruments. And let right ruling roll on like water, and righteousness like a mighty stream. You brought me slaughterings and meal offerings in the wilderness for 40 years, O house of Israel. But you took up Succoth, your sovereign, and Kiyun, your idols, your astral mighty ones, which you made for yourselves. Therefore I shall send you into exile beyond Damasek, said Yahuwah Elohim of hosts, his name. And this is the prophecy of the exile, like officially stated outright. But they're making of mighty ones and slaughtering. You brought me slaughterings and meal offerings in the wilderness for 40 years, but you took up Succoth, your sovereign. So even though you're giving sacrifices to me, you still have your idols and your mighty ones.
Mm-hmm. Right. that was the sin of Israel in the north, specifically the northern tribes that split off with Jeroboam. When Rehoboam took the throne, Jeroboam rebelled. It was actually prophesied in the
They
days
have their idols.
of Shlomo, yeah.
Because
He created the idols, the two calves, one at Bethel and one at Dan.
yes, and he says, "Look who brought you out of Mitzrayim."
And so the
And
two,
that was their names. Shimgam.
I don't know if those were the names then.
Huh.
It may have been. That'd be an interesting thought.
Yeah.
By the time Amos came on the scene, if you read through all the kings of Israel, either start out evil or get evil, and the reoccurring theme that ends up resulting in the annihilation of all these bloodlines, from Ahab's bloodline going back to Omri, and Jeroboam's bloodline, and then Yehu's bloodline when he was anointed after Elisha the prophet anointed Yehu. There's all these bloodlines that are just wiped out, and every time it refers to them promoting the worship of these two golden calves at Dan and at Bethel.
Time is it? Still got time, right? Oh, it's 5 o'clock already.
Yeah.
Huh. All right, let's crack this up.
Yeah.
The tent of the witness was with our fathers. What's going on, Honkum? We're still working. I've been out here this whole time doing it. It's 5 o'clock already.
I just joined him for
Hey, he joined them, and we
40
started-
minutes or so, whatever,
We
it's
got on
fine.
a diatribe.
yeah. No, we had a great time. I gotta go to my family real quick, and
Okay.
actually you and I can talk for a minute. I'll let you be.
Okay.
You can finish your passage, but
Cool. Do we have
I just
time?
got to make a little plan and then make
Okay.
sure my family's ready.
Okay. Should be 15 more minutes.
15 more minutes, you said?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know how long you guys
That's
are
fine.
getting together. Okay. Verse 44, the tent of witness was with our fathers in the wilderness as he appointed, instructing Moshe to make it according to the pattern that he had seen, which our fathers, having received it in turn, also brought with Yehoshua into the land possessed by the nations, whom Elohim drove out before the face of our fathers until the days of Dawid, who found favor before Elohim and asked to find a dwelling for the Elohim of Jacob, but Shlomo built him a house. So, they had a tent of the witness, and Moses is important. This is still just a part of the story. I'm going to move this back. This is still just a part of the story, but basically they have a tent, and then Solomon builds them a house, and David finds favor before Elohim and asks to find a dwelling for the Elohim of Jacob, and Solomon built him a house. Oh boy. 48. However, the Most High does not dwell in dwellings made with hands, as the prophet says, "The heaven is my throne, and earth is my footstool. What house shall you build for me, says Yahweh, or what is the place of my rest? Has my hand not made all these?" That's Isaiah 66, 1, 2. In that he has everything that exists, all the gold, all the wood, all the silver, it all comes from Yah anyway. 66, 1, 2. Thus said Yahweh, the heavens are my throne, and the earth is my footstool. Where is this house that you build for me, and where is this place of my rest? And all these my hand has made, and all these that exist, declares Yahweh. Yet to such a one I look, on him who is poor and bruised of spirit, and who trembles at my word. That's an interesting. Yet to such a one I look, on him who is poor and bruised of spirit, and who trembles at my word. Fear Yahweh. You stiff-necked and uncircumcised in heart and ears. This is stiff-necked is Exodus 32, 9, 33, 3, and 5, and uncircumcised in heart and ears is Leviticus 26, 41, and Jeremiah 6, 10. The circumcision of the heart is not a New Testament concept. It is an Old Testament concept all the way back in Leviticus. We're going to read that real quick, even though I know that we have, because it was something that struck me when I first saw it. Verse 40, but if they confess their crookednesses and the crookedness of their fathers with their trespass in which they trespassed against me, and that they have also walked contrary to me, and that I have also walked contrary to them, and have brought them into the land of their enemies, if their uncircumcised heart is then humbled, and they accept the punishment of their crookedness, then I shall remember my covenant with Jacob and my covenant with Yitzchak, and also remember my covenant with Abraham, and remember the land. And bring them back into the land. Thus, we already got the prophecy of the exile to Babel, and so there we see coming back into the land. You always resist the set-apart spirit as your fathers did, you also do. Don't want to be doing that. The one unforgivable sin is resistance to the spirit. Which of the prophets did your fathers not persecute? And they killed those who before announced the coming of the righteous one, of whom you now have become the betrayers and murderers, who received the Torah as it was ordained by messengers, but did not watch over it. This says Matthew 5:20, but I want to look for the place where we might have to do an addition to this. Where it says that they killed he sent messengers and servants, and they killed the son. I thought we were just in this. Was it 18? Not exactly sure. I don't love being rushed. But where it is that he talks about the servants going to basically a landowner gives authority to his gives the farm to hirelings, and then sends his servants to go get the harvest, and they kill the servants, and then he sends more servants and they kill them, and then he sends the son and says, surely they will respect my son, which they don't, and they kill the son, and that is the prophets and Yeshua. So Stephanos does a really good job explaining all of this. And hearing this, that is the end of his speech right there. That's the quotes, and I'm just going to read 52 and 53 again. Which of the prophets did your fathers not persecute? He's saying this to the high priest. And they killed those who before announced the coming of the righteous one. Yeshua is all throughout this book, from Moses we saw in Deuteronomy 15:18. The Jews of today, their synagogues, I won't read Isaiah 53 because it implicates Jesus too heavily. And the coming of the righteous one was prophesied in every single book. Jeremiah 30:31, Ezekiel, I want to say 36:37. Is it 36? Daniel. I mean, there's 4 men in when we talked about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. 37 is the bones coming back to live. So Ezekiel 37 and Daniel 3, when the 3 men get thrown into the fire, there's 4 with them. And it literally actually says one appearing like the Son of Man. Look, I see Daniel 3:25. He answered and said, look, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt. And the form of the 4th is like the son of Elohim. who received the Torah as it was ordained by messengers, of whom you now have become the betrayers and murderers, but did not watch over it. And hearing this, they were cut to the hearts and gnashed the teeth at him. But he, being filled with the set-apart spirit, looked steadily into the heaven and saw the esteem of Elohim and Yeshua standing at the right hand of Elohim. And he said, Look, I see the heavens open and the Son of Man standing at the right hand of Elohim. Psalms 110, we've read that 100 times here. Not 100, but we've read it a couple times. And the right hand, he being filled with the set-apart spirit, looked steadily into the heaven and saw the esteem of Elohim and Yeshua standing at the right hand. That's Stephanos. He saw the esteem of Elohim and Yeshua standing at the right hand. And he said, Look, I see the heavens open and the Son of Man standing at the right hand of Elohim. Stephanos starts having this vision. He can see the heavens, which is, probably where they get seeing the light, but also literally seeing the light. They were cut to the hearts and gnashed the teeth at him. And crying out with a loud voice, they stopped their ears and rushed upon him with one mind and threw him out of the city and stoned him. And the witnesses laid down their garments at the feet of a young man named Shaul of Tarsus. This is our first introduction to Shaul. Stephanos is before Shaul. The crowd rushes Stephanos after he says, he sees Yeshua standing at the right hand in the spirit and declares it to the people. And let's go to Psalm 110. Yahweh said to my master, Sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet. He's at the right hand, crying out with a loud voice. They, the crowd, the high priest, stopped their ears. They stopped their ears. They stopped listening and rushed upon him with one mind. Their one mind is to get together and rush this man and do harm to him, and threw him out of the city and stoned him. And the witnesses laid down their garments at the feet of a young man named Shaul. And they were stoning Stephanos as he was calling and saying, Master, Yeshua, receive my spirit. He can see the Master Yeshua, and he's calling to him and saying, Take me away. And kneeling down, he cried out with a loud voice, Master, do not hold this sin against them. And having said this, he fell asleep. He died.